Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, October 6, 2022 meetings of the Lower Merion Board of Commissioners. We have 5 committee meetings tonight. We have the Health Committee, the Administrative and Human Resources Committee, the Police Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Building and Planning Committee. So to get things started, we will start with the Health Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner McComb.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have one item on the Health Committee agenda tonight, and that is the approval, appointment, and reappointment of members of the Health Advisory Council. To learn a little bit more about it, we're going to hear from our Public Information Officer and HAC Liaison, Lori Jennings. Ms. Jennings, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Commissioners. We have 2 reappointments to the Health Advisory Council and one appointment of an alternate to become a full member of the Health Advisory Council. So Simon Trowell will become a full member, and Christine Stallkamp and Bill Leopold will become reappointed to the committee, and they are happy to serve with the Health Advisory Committee, and we are really happy to have them.
Having worked with Mr. Trowell, Mr. Leopold, and Christine Stallkamp, I can also say they're all highly skilled, highly capable healthcare professionals. We're lucky to have them. They're making a big contribution to the work of the committee, and I would urge the committee to support their reappointment. Jody, I take it there's nobody online?
There is no one online.
Yeah. Any commissioner comments or questions? Commissioner Kramer?
Yes, as former chair of the Health Committee, I worked with all 3 of them very closely for 2 years, and they are all 3 outstanding healthcare providers who make or with people with healthcare experience, and all of whom have made a tremendous contribution. And for that, I thank all 3 of them.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Any other comments or questions by commissioners? Seeing none, I'll make a motion that we consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following. A, appointment to the Health Advisory Council of Simon Trowell from an alternate to a member for 4-year term, such term to expire October 2026. And second, a retroactive reappointment to the Health Advisory Council of William Leopold for a 4-year term, such term to expire April 2026, and Christine Stallkamp for a 4-year term, such term to expire July 2026. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. Call vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, it passed unanimously. And President Simon, that concludes the work of the Health Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner McComb. Our next committee is the Administrative and Human Resources Committee, and I recognize its Vice Chair, Commissioner Sean Kramer.
Thank you, President Sinai. We have one item on the Administrative and Human Resources Committee agenda tonight, and that would be a resolution authorizing the disposal of certain public records. Should I read this whole thing? Yes. Okay. I'd like to ask the board to consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution authorizing the disposal of certain public records in accordance with the schedules and procedures as set forth in the Municipal Records Manual approved by the Pennsylvania Local Government Records Committee on December 16, 2008 and amended March 28, 2019. Any questions or comments from the board?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? No? None online? All right. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. And that concludes the business of the Administrative and Human Resources Committee.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Kramer. So moving right along, our next committee is the Police Committee, and I recognize its chair once again, Commissioner McComb.
Thank you once again, President Sinai. We have one item on the Police Committee agenda tonight, and that is a possible approval of revisions to a lot driveway access agreement with Cass Marion Station. And I believe we will get a presentation on this from Jerry Adams, our Director of Parking Services.
Yes, there he is. So you can turn your camera on and unmute when you're ready.
Director Adams, the floor is yours. Yes, we can see you and hear you.
Terrific. Yeah, once again, thank you everyone for your time. What we have here is a request to amend our right-of-way agreement with Cass Marion, which is our exit access for Lot 18 in Marion, Bala. The access is relatively important. And the property owner's main concern was that vehicles exiting Lot 18 were doing so extremely fast. And it was unsafe for his employees to walk out the back door to get to their cars or to the lunch table, picnic table that they have in the rear of the building. So his desire was to eliminate and terminate the access right-of-way agreement with the township. Manager McNeely and myself engaged the property owner to see if there was anything we could do to eliminate or moderate some of the risk that he felt his employees were dealing with. He sent a simple request for 3 speed bumps to be placed and be maintained by the township in the driveway where it exits Lot 18 and around the corner where the access travels up to the exit at Old Lancaster Road. You may be able to see the drawing that we have. He also requested that 6 spaces in Lot 18 closest to his property at 312 Old Lancaster be converted over to lot permit parking, not specifically for his employees, but they would be for all to use. But it would be helpful in that most of the employees that he has daily would hopefully be able to utilize those. It's very important for us that we keep this access because if you, again, you can see our photo, the access at Babis Pharmacy on West Montgomery Avenue is not extremely wide. I believe it is less than 15 feet. So it would not serve very well as both an access, an ingress, and an egress. The exit would not be very safe if it was our only exit and or entrance into Lot 18. That is why the township staff recommends approval of this list of amendments to the agreement. And I hope you'll see it the same way. The cost would not be extremely prohibitive. We believe it'll be less than $2,000. It may be significantly less than that. But right now we want to be safe and say that the cost would be approximately $2,000 to purchase, ship, install, as well as the signage that would be necessary to advertise that the speed bumps were coming up.
Thank you very much, Director Adams. We're asking for commissioner comments or questions. I'll note that I'm familiar with the location. I think anyone who's eaten at Jaime's knows that accessing that parking lot when people are coming out can be hazardous, number one. Number two, like so many places in the township, people speed through that intersection. It veers off down to Montgomery and there's sort of a wide down Old Lancaster. People just go too fast. So anything that improves safety and pedestrian access is probably a good idea in my view. It's a minimal cost, so I think we're getting a very good return of safety on our investment in that. So having said that, are there any commissioner comments or questions? Jody, anybody online?
Yes.
Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Well, I'm going to make the motion, which is we consider for a recommendation the Board of Commissioner approval of the following revisions to the Lot 18 driveway access agreement with Cass Marion Station, owner of 312 Old Lancaster Road, Marion. A, the installation of 3 removable speed bumps in the driveway to slow vehicles. B, conversion of 6 meter spaces in Lot 18 to lot permit parking spaces. And C, continuation of the issuance of 12 yearly lot parking permits for employees and client use at the 312 Old Lancaster Road property. Do I have a second? Commissioner Grimes, thank you very much. And at that point, I will call for a vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? 1 abstention noted. The motion passes. And with that, that concludes the business of the Police Committee. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner McComb. Our next committee is the Finance Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Zeloff.
Thank you, President Sinai. There are 5 items on tonight's Police Committee agenda. All are on for action by this committee. We're going to start with 2 contract awards that are before us for our consideration. The first is for EV chargers at the Kegel Complex. Eric Traub, our Chief Financial Officer, is with us and can tell us more. Eric?
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff, and I believe our Sustainability Manager is going to be joining us remotely as well. So I'm going to start and talk through the bidding, the numbers, certain aspects of this project, and then Paloma can talk about the chargers themselves, site selection, grant opportunities, and answer any technical questions you might have. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is not actually talk about this exact bid, but refer back to in June, the manager updated the board on our pilot program involving electric vehicles, talked about the fact that we have 2 sites, one right outside here in the Public Safety Building, and then referenced future work at Kegel. So this is all being funded through CIP Project 4246, which, when it was adopted, was really kind of a broad, undefined program. It wasn't necessarily scoped out for this and these specific projects. It did reference installation of chargers for electric vehicles, but the scope of which was not clearly defined at that time. So where we are today is actually the PSB charger has actually been installed this week. When I walked to lunch today, I actually saw the charger, or the Ford EV was getting charged there. When I came back from lunch, I saw 2 detectives getting in to go out in it. So that is installed and being used. And the second piece then is this EV charging area at the Kegel Complex. So what this is 2 separate bids. There's a general contract or general construction bid, and then an electrical contracting bid. Overall, about 2/3 of the actual overall contract before the board is really for general construction. That's site prep, demolition, retaining walls, paving areas and such at the Kegel Complex to actually create the actual spaces and the actual area. 1/3 of the cost is really related to the electrical construction to support the installation of the chargers and the charging stations for future electric vehicles. Overall, one other thing noted in the issue briefing, there is an actual benefit to the Public Works complex outside of these electric vehicles, and that is that complex is really limited in terms of parking capacity. It's not uncommon for us to have cars double and maybe even triple parked there. So even in a period of which we might have a charger or 1 charging station installed and then have some additional parking, there actually is a benefit to the complex in terms of relief of moving cars around and things of that nature. Overall, what this is going to create is there'll be 4 dual port chargers, so that could support in the future up to 8 EVs. The idea right now, in terms of if you read the memo from the township engineer, is not to do the add alternates because we're not necessarily, it's not necessary at this point, and we can do those in the future. So it'd be just for the 1 dual port at this time. So we had 3 bids for the general construction, 8 for the electrical construction. Overall, those bids came in positive overall at about $277,000, which was over $76,000 less than the construction estimate that the township engineer had. So that's positive, although it is significantly more than what's in that current budget. Now, generally in terms of the budget, we don't anticipate we're going to overexpend this year's budget because of the timing of this project. Where the impact is financially for the township and for the board, if you move forward, is really on next year's budget. So overall, in talking with Paloma and trying to sketch out how much of these projects might be done in this year versus next year, we think probably in the range of $250,000 to $270,000 in additional funding will be necessary in 2023 versus what was shown to the board for this project at the CIP workshop. That's basically why you see the $260,000 number in your issue briefing. So I'm going to pause there and just ask for Paloma to talk a little bit about the process in terms of what happens in terms of getting the charging infrastructure installed, the site selection, grants that she's been working on, and any other technical notes she might have for you before entertaining questions.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, so we have two EVs now in the township, as Eric noted. One of them is up and running. One of them we just got, and we have a third coming. So this is a really important step towards reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, and we continue to evaluate the potential to add more EVs to the fleet in future years. And Public Works staff put a considerable amount of effort into determining a suitable location for a centralized EV charging area where we can charge our current EVs and any future ones that we add. And this was the most cost-effective and operationally feasible option available. And in addition, staff did take proactive steps to make the EV charging projects more cost-effective by installing some of the infrastructure in advance when other work was being done. So great work on our public works staff on keeping the costs as low as possible. So once this project is complete, we will be able to add one dual port charging station, or that the plan is to add one charging station that'll be used by the two Ford F-150 users. And then when new EVs are purchased, we could add more charging stations at a much lower cost because it'll just be the actual charger at that point. This project itself will qualify for up to $9,000 in grant rebates, and we applied for $11,000 in grant rebates for the public safety building chargers and $22,500 in rebates for the 3 electric vehicles. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Okay, thank you, Paloma and Eric. So now it's time for questions and comments from committee members. I guess I'll start. Paloma, can you tell us about any technology risk? Because what's before us is building capacity that we don't currently need, right? So we have a police vehicle that can be charged at the police station. We have a F-150 that came today or arrived very recently and is considered in pilot test. The third vehicle, the second F-150, the delivery is a year or so away, so it's not about to arrive. That's what I understand from speaking to our Public Works Director. So what's before us is building capacity for the future. So because we all would like to, well, I guess, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but we'd like to see EVs in our fleet when they will meet our needs at a cost that's acceptable. So we all think that's coming at some point. It's not the case today. It's probably not the case tomorrow, but hopefully in coming years. So what if the technology changes for charging heavy-duty public works vehicles in the future? Is there risk of that? Or are we simply talking, well, rather than try to explain what the risks might be, I just ask, in general, is there a technology risk?
Yeah, so we're keeping the technology risk pretty low on this one by not installing 4 chargers, by only installing 1 charger at this location, but installing, essentially the bulk of the cost is adding a parking area where EVs will be charged. And in addition, I've been working with the fleet manager to identify what vehicles can be transitioned to EV in the future. And there definitely are at least, a few coming down the line that are going to be ready for replacement and also operationally feasible to convert to EV. So I wouldn't say that we're several years out from transitioning. I think every year we'll be able to evaluate and see what vehicles might be able to be changed. I think it might happen sooner than you think.
Okay, thank you. I also just want to observe that in the first page of the, not the memo, but the first page of the award of contract, everybody, I think Eric explained it well, but what we're talking about is a capital project that has $100,000 in the budget. And we're talking about a $277,000 award. So it is almost 3 times what's in the budget. The engineering estimate is not the budget. They're 2 very separate things. I think, Eric, you did explain that, but I wanted to put that in my own words, because the word budget is used in reference to the $354,000, and that's not accurate. That's an engineering estimate.
Yeah, that's the engineer's estimate of the construction costs for this specific project, but that is unrelated to the actual CIP budget for the project.
Correct. And the point was made that, I guess, Eric, you expect that a lot of the costs to be incurred will be in 2023, and
Yeah.
the approval of the 2023 capital budget is going to occur this year in December. So those are a couple questions to open things up. Other committee members with questions or comments? President Sinai.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeloff. Just a quick follow-up question to what Commissioner Zeloff asked about. It looks like on the electrical side, it's about $90-some-odd thousand for base electrical, and then, if I'm looking at the alternates, it's about $8,000 to $9,000 for additional charger. So is most of the electrical cost also kind of like the fixed cost of electrifying this location? And then once we have electricity there, the chargers or whatever the marginal cost of a charger is?
Yeah, Paloma's shaking her head yes, and that's my understanding from her and past conversations with Mr. Molteri, our fleet supervisor. The bulk of the cost related to this is getting the infrastructure basically to the site. The charging infrastructure itself is not that overall very costly. It's really getting the infrastructure to where you need it to be for the vehicles to park and charge that is the most expensive.
So what would be the total capacity of the site if we someday fully populated it with chargers? Like, would it be like you could fit 8 there? And so
Yeah.
I can think so if we divide this by 8, then that would be the per unit cost if it ever gets fully built out.
Yes, and again, the overall future costs would be the cost that you have here, plus the future costs of the chargers when those are installed and things of those nature.
Right, assuming they're about $8,000 now.
Yes.
Per charger. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other committee members with questions or comments? Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. I think this is incredibly important and absolutely necessary, and I want to thank Paloma and Paul for their efforts in this regard and for their vision. We put $100,000 2 years ago into a sustainability infrastructure line item in the CIP, which was carried forward to this year's CIP. And the idea behind it, because I made the motion to have that done, was that we would be able to at least have a charger, something available so that we could begin the transition process. The $100,000 wasn't an estimate of what the cost would be. It was to put some money aside so that we would have money allocated so that we could begin the process, because otherwise you have a complete chicken and egg problem. You can't buy a vehicle because you don't have a charger, and then you don't want to get a charger because you don't have a vehicle. You have to get the infrastructure in place before you can make the transition to electric vehicles. And in fact, I'd like to point out that we haven't had any functional charger yet for our existing electric vehicle, to the point that my husband and I offered to let the township, at no charge, use the level 2 charger that has been in our garage for almost 5.5 years. It's long past due. I think this is terrific.
Okay, other committee members with questions or comments? Any member of the public online, Jody, since none are in the room?
There is no online.
Okay. So we do have a charger at the police station currently. Eric, isn't that correct? You saw it being used today.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's a dual port. There's only one electric vehicle that we have right now.
Yep.
We do have a second one that we might be charging there. I know that the fleet manager was working on, his word was MacGyvering an old welding unit to be able to charge for the last few months the the Ford vehicle at the Public Works Garage, but I think they'll be happy not to have to do that anymore. So,
And we look forward to continued testing to ensure that any electric vehicles meet our needs, and we look forward to learning about any premiums that would be necessary in order to buy electric vehicles, because that certainly has to be discussed when the time comes. With that, I would ask Commissioner Kramer if you'd like to make the motion. Page 2 of the agenda.
Page 2. I move that we consider for recommendation to the Board of Commissioners approval to award a contract for Kegel Complex electric vehicle chargers to the following bidders in accordance with bids received on Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 at 11 a.m. prevailing time, and the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer with the approval of the Director of Public Works and Township Engineer. And they are for Maverick Construction Corporation and AGM Electric, Inc. in the respective amounts of $184,931.89 and $92,409.24.
Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Is there a second? Commissioner Whalen seconds. The motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, the motion carries unanimously, assuming that Commissioner Stevenson also voted yes.
He did.
But you checked on that.
I'm late, but yes, thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Moving on to the second item for the Finance Committee to consider this evening is the award of a contract for overhead garage doors. I think these are somewhat larger than the automatic garage doors in your house. They certainly are more expensive. What's in front of us is the consideration for awarding a contract for 5 overhead doors. Eric, do you want to tell us more?
Sure. So this is your supply chain inflation story for the evening. As Commissioner Zeloff alluded to, if you look back in 2018, 2019, you had overall costs in the range of kind of $70,000 to $80,000 for projects that even included a larger number of doors than this project. But we're in a totally different environment right now, and this was the only bidder. This is the vendor who has done all of the overhead door replacement. They have done a very good job. The township has no issues with them, the quality of the work. We haven't really received other bids, and other bids occasionally that we have received for these projects in the past have been much more expensive. Again, the vendor's done good work. From looking at this, it's maybe a little bit tough to stomach, but when you look at the alternative, we don't necessarily see that rejecting and rebidding this would lead to any real change in the results. So while it is a little bit of a hit to the budget, we do recommend moving forward. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Eric. It certainly is tough to stomach a bid that is more than double the budget and the estimate, and more than double the historical acquisition costs for 5 overhead garage doors. To me, it hinges on whether we need them now.
No, you didn't say it hinges on.
I was working on that all day. Whether it hinges on whether the doors are needed now or we can extend their life, and our Public Works Director told me today that they're needed now. Ernie, would you like to comment on that?
I would agree with Public Works Director. This has been a multi-year project to replace all of these doors at our very large Kegel complex. The doors got to work in order for Public Works to do their jobs, and it's important to just keep moving on this and get them repaired.
Thank you. Committee members with questions or comments on this item?
Yeah,
Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zeloff. Eric, you may or may not be able to answer this, but it is unique that we just get one bidder in a project of this size. And I don't know
how many other vendors are out there that do similar work, but I would assume that there's some. So since we're supposed to take a look at bids and take, the best in that, which is at the lesser price, can you tell us what we did to try to get other bids when we saw only one? I was about to say come in the door, but Commissioner Zeloff will hit me.
Well, they don't necessarily come in the door anymore. They kind of come through the
Right.
through the interweb. But in terms in general, and also speaking with the Public Works Director, this contractor is unique in that they service these very large doors. And if you actually look back, I think the 3 previous series, there was one where there was just them, so similar 1 bid. I think there was one with 2 bids, and maybe there was another one with 3 bids. So it's never something where we've had a lot of bids. And from past discussions with the Director of Public Works and our Facilities Director, the other vendors, their feeling was, would likely be buying the doors from this company and then would be marking, having a markup on this. So we're a little bit held captive in this perspective, and there aren't that many vendors who work in this space. And, you've probably have heard stories about people trying to finish housing developments and people moving in without garage doors in the last 6 or 9 months. It just seems to be something that's really an issue. In terms of if there are other suppliers out there, the system that we have, the pen bid system, anyone who is registered on that, who has any affiliation or something with garage doors or whatever, however they categorize things, will always be notified of any bids that come open. So that's an automatic thing since we went to this bidding platform that happens. So it's not about, us trying to, research and find other garage door vendors and then sending them an advertisement and things of that nature. We think that does a lot of the legwork for us. I just think we're in a niche here where there's not a whole lot of other games in town.
So they would not have known on the front end of submitting the bid that they are the only bidders.
Correct.
Right?
They don't
And
see
go,
anything.
"Aha,
It's not like they could, maybe like 6 years ago, kind of come 15 minutes before a bid opening in this room and sit around, no one else is here, I'm going to scratch off and,
And up the ante,
yeah.
right.
They bid blindly. They don't see how many other bidders are there. Only we see that, and then once the bids are open, they see the results.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. Thank you, Commissioner Zello.
Other commissioners with questions or comments? Any member, would the member of the public in the room like to make a comment? And there are none online, Jody?
There are a few people online, but no one has their virtual hand raised.
Okay. I will move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a contract award for overhead door replacement to the J-Door Company in accordance with bids received on Thursday, September 22nd, 2022, with the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer and the approval of the Director of Public Works and the Township Engineer in the amount of $139,575. Do I have a second? Commissioner McComb seconds. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none. Madam Secretary, I believe that with Commissioner Stevenson's aye vote, that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, the third item on the Finance Committee agenda tonight is for us to authorize public hearings for the proposed 2023 operating budget and the 2023 to 2028 capital improvement plan. Eric, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Nope, standard item we have to do for the budget hearing, so move forward.
We have recently adjusted our calendar so that the budget, the final meeting of the year will be on December 14th, and at which time we will vote on both budgets. And because of that schedule, that sets the date for the 2 public hearings. So before I make a motion, are there any public comments on our calendar? Seeing none, I will move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners that we authorize the Township Secretary to advertise notice that the proposed 2023 budget and the proposed 2023 to 2028 capital improvement plan are available for public inspection, and that 2 public hearings will be held. One on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022, at approximately 7:30 p.m., and Wednesday, November 30th, at approximately 6 p.m. Do I have a second? Commissioner Bernheim seconds. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Verifying that Commissioner Stevenson voted yes, Madam Secretary, that also passes unanimously. Our 4th item on our Finance Committee agenda is for us to consider allocating our pension funds that have been received from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we will allocate them between our 2 pension funds. Eric, do you want to tell us more?
Sure. So this is an annual resolution that comes before you in October based on, and the point of the resolution is to do 2 things. Distribute the calendar year pension state aid that we receive each September. It has to be allocated within 30 days. And also to set employee contributions to the pension funds for the next year. So the township received $2.57 million approximately in pension state aid funding this year. Of that, 1.7 is going to be deposited into the police pension plan, and about $857,000 to the employees' pension plan. These amounts are about $456,000 less than the overall minimum municipal obligation, or MMO. That basically is your pension bill for the year. So therefore, the township will contribute that amount to the pension plan. That overall amount, though, is $195,000 less than what we had in our budget, so that will be budgetary savings that you'll see when you look at your estimated actual next month in your proposed budget. The reason for that is there is an 8% increase in the state aid unit value that came from the state after a couple of years where we had decreases in that unit value, which generally mean we pay more than we had budgeted into the pension plan. When there's a increase in that state aid unit value, we generally will pay less into the pension plan than what we had budgeted. Overall, the MMO for next year is about $3.3 million, with about $2.55 million of that for the police and about $755,000 for the employees plan. And then the other main item for the resolution is just setting the employee contributions for next year. Those are set upon, or based upon, the current labor agreements between the township and its workers association, the township and its FOP. And that's really all I have for you, unless you have questions.
Thank you, Eric. And so to be clear, what's before us is a resolution that only pertains to the funds received from Pennsylvania and the allocation of them, and as well as specifying the employee contributions to the pension plans. In the case of the Workers Association, depends on years of service. In the case of the FOP, it is a fixed amount. Those are both in the current labor contracts, and even though they are both expiring at the end of the year, what's proposed before us is that those contribution rates continue into next year, and that the employees who are not in either collective bargaining agreement also will continue with the contribution rates as they have previously. Those are decisions by this board, and I'm not suggesting that they change, but to be clear, that is also included in the resolution. The 2023 expected receipt of funds from the state and the allocation of them is in the memo, but not part of the resolution that's before us. It's very clear that state aid is essential for the funding of our two pension plans. They are significant pension plans, and without the $2.6 million of state aid, it would be extraordinarily burdensome for this township to fully fund those pensions. So, with that, do committee members have any questions or comments? And I should also note that our manager sent us all an email a week or so ago with some added details on our pension plans and the MMO. the minimum municipal obligation, which is a state-defined term that is part of the calculation and that we and every municipality go through in funding pension plans. So, seeing no questions or comments from committee members, do any members of the public have any questions or comments in the room? Jody, online?
No one has their hand up online.
Okay. I will move then that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners that we adopt a resolution attached that is required by State Act 205 that allocates our pension state aid and sets employee contributions for 2023. Do I have a second? Commissioner Whalen seconds. All those in favor of recommending the resolution, raise your hand. All those opposed or abstaining, so indicate. Madam Secretary, that motion also passes unanimously. All right, we're down to one. Last item on the Finance Committee is similar to the item that we just discussed in that it is regarding the allocation of significant funding that the township's in receipt of from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In this case, it is the annual receipt of funds that we typically then allocate to the Lower Merion Fire Relief Association. Eric, do you want to tell us more?
Just really briefly, it's $164,000 or 26.2% more than we got last year. The state allocates these funds based on two factors, of which they say is 50% of it is based upon population. So perhaps the township's 2020 census number actually helped in this regard. And 50% is based on the market value of real estate compared to the state average. They don't really tell us the exact computation of what's behind it, but those are the two factors. We got more money than we anticipated, and basically within 30 days of this resolution being finalized, we will transfer this money to the Relief Association.
Great, thank you very much. It is very important that this be conducted in a public meeting and all commissioners understand the significance of the funds received from the state that then go to the Lower Merion Fire Relief Association. That association is not controlled by the township. It has a separate governing body. Their mission is to provide funds in support of our fire service. A year ago, at the end of 2021, they had some $14 million in assets. Certainly lower today, but it's still significant. And it's important that they continue to fund and support our fire service and probably to increase their support for our fire service. Do any commissioners have any questions or comments on this resolution that we're considering? Commissioner Bernheim.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioner Zeloff. And if my memory is correct, while this may be more than last year, it's less than it was 2 years ago. And
yeah, last year was a real decline.
Right.
I have a history I'll send around to the board, a several-year history that I can
Right,
email you.
and so, and the exact metrics are a little bit, we'll say, hard for us to discern,
Yeah,
and what the number
it's-
is.
It's done all behind the curtain, and then we just get the amount. They don't necessarily share the calculations with us.
And as Commissioner Zeloff indicated, the relief is not controlled by the township, but we have from time to time requested and from time to time received a financial statement of the relief and an explanation of how they are utilizing the funds. That is controlled by statute. There is some interpretation that occurs on occasion when there are requests, and I just would, join in Commissioner Zeloff's, comment that this is a fund which has got a significant amount to it, and as much as we are able to utilize it for our fire services when they ask for it, I think that we ought to make sure that we are of assistance to see that occurs, and to recognize that part of it is also kept in abeyance for some problems that may arise, such as some of the unfortunate incidents we had in the past year. So certainly we'll support this, and thank you for the information, Eric.
Other commissioners with questions or comments on this agenda item? Seeing none. Any questions or comments from members of the public, either in the room or on Zoom?
No one on Zoom.
Seeing none, I will move that the Finance Committee recommend to the Board of Commissioners the adoption of the attached resolution, which would authorize township staff to disperse the 2022 Commonwealth of Pennsylvania state aid allocation of $791,373.20 to the Lower Merion Firemen's Relief Association. Do I have a second? Commissioner Bernheim seconds. All those in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, that I believe means that we are 5 for 5 on unanimous votes this evening with the 5 Finance Committee items. And President Sinai, that concludes the business of the Finance Committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zeloff. We have one remaining committee for this evening, and that's the Building and Planning Committee. And I recognize its chair, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you, President Sinai. So we have one item on the Building and Planning Committee agenda, although it is a very important and substantive item. That is the preliminary land development plan and the developers agreement for 231 and 251 St. Asaphs Road, 1 and 3 Bala Plaza in Bala, Kinwood. So let me outline for everyone how we envision this going tonight. We are going to hear a presentation by our staff about the proposal that's the subject of the preliminary plan, and Jillian's going to do that for us. And then we are going to invite the applicant to make some brief comments about the plan. And then we will take questions and comments, if people would like to do it then, from commissioners for either the applicant and or for staff. I actually am going to slow down since the applicant's coming in so they know how we're going to do this tonight. Because we have two separate items on the, even though it's done as one agenda item, there are really two separate parts of this. One is the developers agreement, and one is the other is the preliminary plan. So those are two separate motions that will have to be made, actions that this committee is going to be asked to take. So the presentation is on the whole project. Questions and comments can be on any aspect of the project as you wish, but then at a certain point I'm going to turn specifically to the developers agreement. We will get through that process, and then we will turn to the preliminary plan and go through that process. I'll say for both commissioners and members of the public who are here and the applicant, in a sense you'll have two bites at the apple with any questions or comments that you have, because you can ask them while we're talking about developers agreement and then ask them during preliminary plan. I would only ask that you don't ask the same things in each stage. Hopefully that's clear to everyone about what we're going to do. So I'm going to invite Jillian to take it away.
Thank you. Sorry, let me.
Do you want to log into Zoom and register? Down on TV, so I guess.
I can give you a thumb drive with a presentation on it.
Perfect. That works.
What?
Sorry, we're short people on LMTV, so we missed a step of logging that computer into Zoom so the screen could be shared. All right, let me just pull this up and share my schedule.
This is the one time we don't have anything else to discuss tonight on the agenda. So take your time, no pressure.
I rarely feel pressure.
Philly's winning too.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, let's see.
I was hoping you'd get your predictions.
Is that the first two?
It has to be. If they win two.
Just checking.
Fair question.
Is that this year?
Oh, yeah, no,
Yes.
that's fine. All right.
You know what they say, we predicted the amount or time, we don't predict the amount and the time. It's like the mantra I teach you about day one in wrestling. Yep.
Okay, apologies for the technical error. So I am going to very quickly take you through the nuts and bolts of the plan before I hand it off to other staff members to talk a little bit about the master plan and the developers agreement. Just to orient everybody to the site, there are two properties. One is referenced as 231 and 251 St. Asaphs, and the other, which is 1 and 3 Bala Plaza. And the other property is 333 East City Avenue, which is 2 Bala Plaza. They're shown here on the screen, and 1 Bala Plaza and 3 are located right up here. The red is the buildings, and the gray is the surface parking surrounding the buildings. And below here is 2 Bala Plaza. And as I said, 1 and 3 has 3 buildings located on it, 1 6-story building and 2 7-story buildings. And then 2 Bala Plaza, which is located, has access from East City Avenue as well as St. Asaph's Road, and also Decker is a 10-story office building. So I'm going to quickly go through the proposed conditions. As I said, there's 3 existing office structures. The plan includes the construction of 3 office buildings, which are shown outlined here. It also includes proposed residential buildings. All of these proposed residential, with the exception of 1 at the bottom of the screen here, are mixed-use building with ground floor retail included. There's 1 proposed hotel and 2 proposed commercial buildings that are standalone. There's also a proposed parking garage located in this location, C3. And there's a number of different amenities that are associated with the project that you'll hear us reference, so I just want to orient everybody to them. Down towards the intersection of St. Asaph's and Belmont, you have Gateway Plaza and Lower Terrace, not to be confused with Lower Plaza, which is located just above between the C1 retail commercial building and the R1 mixed-use building. There's also Village Square, and then, and I'm sure you may remember this from past review, there is Bala Park, which includes the amphitheater. On the 2 Bala Plaza site, there are 2 residential buildings with retail located at ground level. One of the conditions of approval requires the applicant to come back to, for review for what we're calling amended preliminary plan. This would bring each phase, portion or sub-phase through the review process. That would include Planning Commission, Building and Planning Committee review. And it's at that phase, that second step, that we would be doing a more in-depth review looking at architecture, specific landscaping specific to that portion of the site. And I'm just going to quickly go over the project phasing. When you last saw this, there was 4 phases, which are shown here with the various colors, including phase 1, which is located here, included the R1A and R1B building. And then you move to the 2 office buildings located right here in phase 2, as well as additional development, which is an office building and a residential building in phase 3. And then the rest of the balance of the development was to be constructed in phase 4. Since you've reviewed that this past spring, the plan has moved to 2 phases, with phase 1 being shown in blue here and phase 2. And what I want to kind of highlight and outline to you is that the current developers agreement includes what are called priority improvements. These include R1A and R1B buildings, which are shown here with blue stars, and also the hotel building, which is shown here with a yellow star. And I just want to go over the potential scenarios that the developers agreement allows for. So scenario 1 would be that R1A and R1B would be constructed. And with those, there would be amenities that would be included. And that includes the Gateway Plaza, as well as Lower Terrace and Lower Plaza. And also the developers agreement contemplates what we're calling an interim park that would be constructed in the location of Office South. And that would be a temporary improvement until Office South is ultimately constructed. A second scenario would include the hotel building, as well as the pathway improvements that are shown along Monument Road, extending from Writers Ferry Road, and along Belmont Avenue. And of course, our preference would be that they all be constructed together. That's what this plan would show, all of these various improvements and amenities included with the 2 buildings as well as the hotel. So that's scenario 3. And then prior to the applicant being able to move on to phase 2, they would be required, the development agreement requires them to construct the priority improvements, either Office North or Office South, the Bala Park, which is the central green here, which is located in this area, and 2 additional phase 1 buildings. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris to talk a little bit about the master planning process.
Thanks, Julian. The township doesn't usually see developers agreements, and we usually don't see master plans. When we have large development projects in the township, the board's very aware, when you get a large development project, whether it be a residential subdivision, an institutional expansion of one of our campuses, or even here on a commercial property, there's a lot of concern over what's next. Master planning is to the township's advantage. It provides a lot of opportunities for coordinated development, to find ways to get efficiencies for transportation, for open space, economically, socially. It just makes better design. We want to encourage developers to master plan. That was one of the things when this project was first approached to staff by the applicant, we encourage them to master plan. We want to be able to see what's next, because that also provides a certain amount of certainty to the residents surrounding it. That was one of the things that we always hear in the public realm of what's next, what's going to happen. Well, knowing what's next through a master plan is helpful to the neighbors, to the township as a whole, because we can get better development, and then also to the developer to help base their future investment decisions. Oh, it's this one. Oh, you switched my mouse. So this property warrants a master plan, just because of its size, its location within the City Avenue district, and its role as one of the most productive economic parcels within the township. It should be master planned. The care of this shouldn't be left to just ad hoc development. Every piece of this should be properly planned. But when you master plan something, it takes many years to build out. You can't build all of that at once. The municipality's planning code protects developers for 5 years from when they get their approval. A project of this scale couldn't be built in 5 years. I don't think anybody would want it to be built. I don't think you could raise the money to build it. It couldn't actually be built with the existing tenants. So it needs to be phased. That's where this developers agreement comes in, to allow a plan to be phased over time. So in this case, what the developer is doing is the township is extending the protection, vesting the rights of the 2018 code under which this was submitted for additional 15 years above the 5 years that would already be vested under the municipality's planning code in exchange for certain considerations. Developers agreements are a common tool. They're just not to Lower Merion. These are for these large master scale projects, and they allow municipalities to work with developers to achieve mutual goals. Developers typically look for this to vest their development rights or to increase density, where in exchange, municipalities normally get amenities, additional amenities. They get amenities front-loaded, or they get other considerations up front. So both sides win through the master planning process. This is what this tool that you're being asked to consider along with the development plan is all about. So the preliminary plan that you have before you, as Jillian mentioned, is really just, it's a tentative sketch. You couldn't build this. The stormwater hasn't been fully worked out. Some of the traffic hasn't been worked out. So there's a provision in here with the developers agreement. They're interlocked together, that as each of these buildings or groups of buildings that are divided into subphases come forward, they will be reviewed for their architecture, their traffic, their stormwater. We've done the basic zoning. We know they comply with zoning. We know they comply with parking. But all of those other design details that we usually sweat in the Building and Planning Committee will then come forward for each of those. But in order to approve this plan, you also need to approve the developers agreement. If you don't do them both together, we'll either need to amend the conditions of approval or deny or find a way to do the plan. But these things are interlocked together. So as you're evaluating this tonight, I think there's 3 big points that you need to help to evaluate in this, because this is a very big project. First, does this site plan and the phasing agreement improve the site? Is this the best plan that we can get? Do all the pieces fit together? And does this further the chances? Remember, 10 years ago when City Avenue District was put together, it was designed to make development was going to happen in City Avenue. We wanted to make sure it was the best and highest quality development. And part of that was new residential development, new retail development, and hopefully new office development, because office development is really the higher and best of those uses within this. Does this site plan create the environment that we would be seeing new office space and new high-quality retail? And is this the type of plan that will make this particular parcel, which is very big in Lower Merion Township, competitive and retain its place as an economic generator for the township? Also, I think the board should consider how the site plan and the accompanying phasing agreement improve the overall City Avenue district. This is a really big parcel in the City Avenue district. The future of City Avenue is somewhat tied to the success of this. Does this plan help to bring the district together? Right now, the district is in a transition phase. It's kind of an awkward phase, where it had a lot of office uses, it had some freestanding residential, and had some freestanding commercial. Does this development in this site help to tie all those together into that vision of being a walkable district? Instead of having to drive to your office and drive home, or drive into your apartment and drive to the store, does this actually help to make it more of a neighborhood, a vital place that people want to go? The township is competing with other municipalities that are trying to do just this. In particular, I think our peer groups are the Conshohocken, the Navy Yard, and King of Prussia. All of those areas are trying to make these mixed-use environments where people live, they have high amenities, they have a lot of open space, and they have a lot of activity. Does this help to do that for overall City Avenue? And then finally, does this site plan help to make the City Avenue District a better neighborhood for existing and future residents? Currently, if we just take out any the recent development approvals, there are 1,500 units around City Avenue. As we consider considering Sutton Terrace, the Fairmount, they're right on the border of that. 191, some of the new development that's taking place in City Avenue. There's 1,500 units just on the other side, on the Philadelphia side. That's a lot of people. They need things to do. They want to live in a neighborhood. They don't want to live in an office park that's necessarily transitioning. Does this help? I have a couple graphics to help explain this. When you look at the site, and I have it outlined in yellow, the site's here, and I just wanted to highlight some of the recent proposed and approved development that's highlighted in white. And when we started to look at what was happening in the last couple months, you've seen the Federal Shopping Center come in for an approval of a mixed-use building. Last month, you saw the Keystone property come in for the properties that are right in here. And then this is what's happening over on this side. And when you start to look at those all together, they actually form kind of a planning area. They're actually integrated together. That you can cross, with the new pedestrian improvements that are required in each of these, with the open spaces that are required in each of these, they functionally work together. And they actually work as a square. And we looked at this and we said, well, how does this compare to suburban square? This is a little bit bigger in area, certainly has more office. It has about 1/3 of the retail, but they're equally kind of vibrant sort of planning areas. They're functionally integrated when you start to look at this. And then you say, if this came together and it was connected with all this retail integrated together through pedestrian paths and through the open spaces that are desired, does that make the surrounding parcels that aren't developed more developable? Does that create the environment that would attract those trophy land uses that the entire purpose of the City Avenue District was created to try to get? And there are actually 5 big parcels that are out there. There's 2 that we've been focusing on with this application, which are the office buildings here, and there's another office building back there. But then there's also 1 on the Keystone property, and there's 2 on the federal property. All of these could conceivably be those higher and better uses. And then finally, from a neighborhood perspective, these numbers on these boxes indicate the number of units in existing residential buildings. You can see the location of the parcel that we're talking about tonight is highlighted in yellow. How does this bring all of these together? One of the key elements of these priority improvements with the trails and why the Monument Avenue trails are so important, if you're at 191 or at the new Hanover building, to get to the Kinwood Trail or to get to the Pencoid waterfront, which are very desirable things. Anytime we talk to somebody there, they want to go there. They shouldn't be driving there. We want to avoid people that can walk someplace not having to walk. We want to provide that. Well, they can't walk on the 191 side because there's physical constraints. But crossing over to this parcel on the Monument side, where the trails that are priority improvement, will allow all of those people on that side of the district to walk down towards the Kinwood Trail safely and then eventually down to the Pencoid district with a few additional improvements. And then it also allows those people to go over to where I have the stars identified of these new retail restaurants that we're expecting, the supermarket that we're expecting with last month's approval at the Keystone building, and then some of the other amenities that are also proposed with this piece. It helps to make this more of a neighborhood for everybody there. But that's why it's such a key piece of this. Does it do enough? That's for the board to evaluate, but I wanted to just bring some of these larger planning considerations to your attention as you start to evaluate this plan. Then from a concept standpoint, this all makes sense. But then again, the essence of this, the success of this is in the details, and that's where the board needs to decide in all of this, does this successfully do it as the developer's agreement is written? So Jillian and I are here. We're happy to answer any of your questions about any of the details. We'll leave it up to you.
Okay. Thank you. So I thought what we would do next before we turn it over to commissioners is give the applicant an opportunity to make a statement. And let me just say first, I see Mr. Rosenzweig getting up, which is fine. I expect that there's going to be a decent amount of exchange from the commissioners, which will bring out a lot of the facts about this plan. So you're welcome to make some preliminary comments, but I would anticipate that other issues will come out that will require your response.
Thanks, Commissioner Grimes. And I'm just going to do kind of a broad overview. And then Janet Giuliani wants to speak. Al Fiscaldo will introduce the team, and then you'll take it away. Okay. So good evening, Commissioners. I'm Phil Rosenzweig. It is nice to see you this evening from this side of the dais. And I'm very pleased to be before you on what I think is the most important project that you may ever consider in Lower Merion during your tenure as Commissioners. And I'd like to take the board back to a pre-2012 Board of Commissioners and to the purpose and the motivation of writing the City Avenue zoning district in the first place, because I was privileged to be involved in that very process along with former Commissioner Manos and a number of other people who saw, as did I, the fact that Lower Merion's office stock, which was largely built in the 1950s and 1960s, was worn out and past its prime and no longer even qualified as Class A office space, let alone older Class A office space, but was considered by most in the market to be B- at best office space. And we were then, as a community, losing opportunities for new major office tenants, which bring new major employment and business privilege tax and lots of employees to our community. And now, more than a decade later, Lower Merion still faces the exact same scenario. When was the last time new Class A office space came to our fair township? The answer is probably sometime in the early 80s, and it wasn't all that much. And if it were not for Tishman Speyer and team investing tens of millions of dollars in the existing 1 million square feet of office space already at 1, 2, and 3 Bala Plaza, this township would have suffered the loss of Philadelphia Insurance as a major employer in our community, and would have lost other major tenants, which all generate business privilege tax and lots of affluent employees who want to live, work, and play in Lower Merion. So the whole idea of coming up with the City Avenue zoning ordinance at the time, a decade ago, was to foster an environment in which new Class A office could come to Lower Merion. And rather than the spate of building after building after building of multifamily resi with maybe meaningful, maybe not so meaningful, maybe not even full ground floor retail, right? This was an opportunity to create a live, work, play environment that sets up the possibility for the long process by which commercial landlords have to plan for and then ultimately tenant and finance large commercial office buildings. Large commercial office buildings do not get built on spec. Large commercial office buildings don't even go into a finance planning phase until they are more than 50% pre-leased, and sometimes a much higher percentage than that, because it is a long lead time to get from planning through tenant procurement, through financing and final design, and then ultimately to construct a new Class A office building. And why shouldn't Lower Merion have the next AmerisourceBergen headquarters, world headquarters, which wound up being a 450,000 square foot building that got built in Conshohocken? Why shouldn't Lower Merion be the recipient of that kind of a tenant looking for that kind of a Class A environment? And I think I heard Chris or Jillian say that the competing markets are essentially King of Prussia, Conshohocken, and the Navy Yard. That's really exactly right. But I encourage you, any of you, to go take a drive to King of Prussia or Conshohocken or the Navy Yard and see the hundreds of thousands of square feet of new Class A construction that is occurring in those environments, because the business leaders and government leaders of those places set into motion a process which takes years, upon which a developer could rely and a prospective tenant could rely in order to plan to make their move and to commit to the extremely long-term, extremely expensive tenancy, long-term tenancy in a commercial office building. So I'd like you to be thinking about the very purpose of the City Avenue zoning district and the fact that we believe that this plan creates the environment, sets the table, as it were, for the developer owner in this instance to be able to go into the marketplace and begin to work very hard to source large commercial tenancies, particularly those who are currently residing in leases that will burn off in the city of Philadelphia, who have indicated publicly that they do not intend to renew their office space in Philadelphia. So they are looking for what I'll call inner suburbs, inner ring suburbs, for their options in terms of where they're going to land. And in many instances, you're talking about tenants who are in 500, 600, 700, 800,000 square feet, 1 million square feet of space, who, in the city, who no longer wish to do that, and who are looking for 400,000 or 500,000 square feet or something like that of space in an inner ring suburb. Commissioners, don't let that next tenant go to Conshohocken. Don't let them go to King of Prussia. Don't let them go to the Navy Yard. Create the environment, set the table for them to come to Lower Merion. A couple of very quick things, and then I'll let the team do their job. I want to remind you all that this development is set on the location of existing paved parking lots. Right? There's 1 million square feet of existing office, and everything around it is paved. So this is infill development on existing pavement, and there is some complexity to that because all the existing tenants in the 1 million square feet, which I believe Ms. Giuliani is 93% leased. Okay, I'm still going to stop. But those tenants need a place to park. And under their leases, their commitments that they have a place to park. So all the parking spaces can't go away at once, and that's why the phasing of this project is also particularly important, because we've got to balance existing building, existing tenants, existing lease commitments with the future development. Also, super important, right? If the commissioners were to adopt and pass a resolution approving preliminary land development plan and approve entry into a developer's agreement, that allows, you know, my client to go and start marketing the office and the retail and all the other components of this project. There's already a huge amount of expressed interest in the hotel, but you will see again every building. There's a sub-phase plan that will come before you where you will get to look at the details of every building as if it were the first time you're seeing that building, only with the predicate that it's zoning compliant, but you get to apply all your other ordinances that aren't the protected rights under the developer's agreement to that building, and you get to deal with traffic, and you get to deal with comments on design. All of that, you have a full opportunity to vet on a building-by-building basis. I also just want to emphasize that a project of this scale, of this scope, is something that you would not want to have happen in 5 years. This site was always going to be a site that needed a long period of time in which to kind of evolve the process and to make sure that what is developed is correctly developed, correctly tenanted, and that the retail components of this project are extremely meaningful. And they are part of the vital nature of the plan itself. Because in order to attract the right office tenants, you need to show them restaurant opportunities and other retail opportunities. You need to show them where some of their people can live, work, play. So there is a residential component to it, but it's not a residential component, you know, of a building standing alone somewhere with some ground floor retail unto itself. Those components need to work with the office components, which need to work with the retail components, and also Lower Merion has a huge need for a hotel anyhow, but the kind of corporate tenants we're hoping to procure want to see a hotel as part of this live, work, play environment. So having said all that, I just want to clarify my role for you all, which is that I have the privilege of reporting to senior management in New York, along with Janet and with Al, and I am here all evening and beyond to answer any specific questions you have that aren't otherwise more appropriately directed toward any of our professionals who are here this evening. And I want to thank you for all the patience shown so far in a painstaking and complicated process, and for working with us in what I'll term loosely a partnership context to try to make sure that Lower Merion and my client work hand in hand to evolve what is the logical place for this kind of development in Lower Merion for the future benefit of all of us, the residents, the taxpayers, the citizens, and the future of our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So, Jillian and Chris, thank you for all your time this week. Commissioners, thank you. I know it's been a long day and a long evening, so in the spirit of brevity, I'm going to just go over 4 points tonight, 4 points that Chris Lessing asked me to go over. And probably there's 2 or 3 takeaways in each point, with the first point having 4 takeaways. I will tell you that, well, first I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Janet Giuliani with Tishman Speyer Properties. I'm the managing director at Bala Plaza. I have oversight for Bala Plaza, with my primary responsibility being leasing. For the past 16 years, I've been on the City Avenue Special Services District Board. I'm currently vice chair of the executive committee. Not only do I work in the township, I live in the township. I was born in the township. I've spent almost my entire life in the township, other than maybe, 10 years. So I am very committed to the township, and I care about what happens here. All right, so back to my 4 points. If I leave you with one takeaway tonight, and if there's only one takeaway that we leave you with, the takeaway I want to leave you with is that we have a vision. We have a master plan. And this master plan is about much more than development. It's about building community. It's about placemaking. It's about bringing the campus and the community together in a live, work, play, grow environment, in an urban green space environment, which Yuki Miodovnik, who's here with us tonight, is going to speak to extensively. So, on to the points. Okay, point number 1. Julie, can you move to the slide for me? Thank you. Oh, no, you're on Martin Decker's. Okay, that's right, the talking points are, I'll walk off of this. Okay, so point number 1 is ownership's ongoing investment in the property. And Phil, he's a hard act to follow because he starts to cover my points, but he does it so much better than I do. Anyway, Tishman's ownership's ongoing investment in the property. So over the past 16 years since Tishman acquired ownership of the property, they've invested $63 million in capital improvements. This does not include improvements in customer spaces. So when I say capital improvements, I'm talking about corridors, restrooms, exterior facades, garage work. In customer spaces, we've invested another $60 million. $120 million in 16 years. It's a lot of money. In the past, there was a project, oh, Jillian, if you can go back one slide. This is One Bala redeveloped right here. In 2021, we completed the redevelopment of One Bala Plaza. It was a $45 million in-place redevelopment. We completed this redevelopment with the tenants in place. We didn't lose a tenant. And I will tell you that while our project is going to be, like our master plan is going to be the gateway to Lower Merion Township, this property is the gateway into our master plan. It's pretty spectacular. And I invite you to come here at night and drive down Kings Grant into the property when it's lit up and you see the interior staircase in that sage glass bump out. You'll have a wow moment. So for One Bala. So the next slide, Jillian, please. At 2 Bala, we just finished the storefront renovation where we invested another, not sure what happened to 2 Bala, but we invested another, that's okay. We invested another, well, sorry, you'll have to see it in person, $1.2 million. In addition to that, we've fully amenitized the property and we continue to amenitize the property. We put a Top Hat Espresso coffee bar in at 2 Bala. We have Paganos in at 1 Bala. We have outdoor event space at 2 Bala between Saks and 2 Bala. At 3 Bala, we have event space. At 1 Bala, we have event space. And all of our event spaces are open to the community and the public. And most recently, our favorite event space is the 1 Bala basketball court. Because, interestingly, we never advertised this to the community. It was just originally meant to be for the employees of 1, 2, and 3 Bala Plaza. But every night at 6 and 7 o'clock, you see the community come in and use it. And so they've got this text thing going on where they invite their friends and they're playing, and we welcome the community to do it, and we're thrilled to see this happening. Okay, point number 1. Point number 2. We are a Class A owner even after a drought. Since 2007, Bala Plaza has outperformed the Bala Cynwyd market every single year. And when I say outperformed, I'm talking about percent leased. Right now, as Phil mentioned, we're 93% leased. This is the highest percent leased we've been through since 2009. It's incredible. Like, when I wrote the stats recently, it's even hard for me to believe. Like, how is it that we've come through COVID with a looming recession and we are 93% leased? It's unbelievable, right? The highest number. And I'm going to tell you the reason why. It's the capital investment we've put back into our properties, and it's the fact that we're out marketing heavily to the small entrepreneurial tenant, because this is our success, this is our bread and butter. 70% of our tenants are under 5,000 square feet. This is the incubator tenant, this is the tenant we want, and really I should be calling them our customer, because they're our customer and they're Lower Merion Township's customer. This is the customer that helps us all flourish. So this customer, and it goes back to the Philadelphia insurance story. They started as 20,000 square feet, they grew to 300,000 square feet, and they occupy 2 buildings today. It's the same story. There's a tenant, it was Vitalist. They started as 2,500 square feet as PC Helps. Vitalist acquired them, they're 28,000 square foot today. Primavera Software. Joel Koppelman started that company as a 3,000 square foot fledgling software company, grew it to 50,000 square feet, and they became Oracle. And I can give you example after example of this, where you've got the incubator tenant that grows. That incubator customer it's a success story for them, but it's a success story for us, and it's a success story for the township, because they spend their money in the township. They go to the restaurants, the banks, the doctors, the dry cleaners. So these are the customers that we want. All right. Point number 3. Next steps for office development, why and now. Okay, development rights will give us the flexibility to grow and retain the entrepreneurial customer. I just gave you examples of entrepreneurial customers. We were lucky we kept Philadelphia Insurance. We almost lost them. But the customers that we have lost, we lost Hamilton Lane in Bala Cynwyd. We should have kept Hamilton Lane, but we lost them to Conshohocken. We lost Schifrin and Barraway when they grew to 25,000 square feet. We lost Oracle. We want to stop losing these customers. We want to keep them, and we want to give them the opportunity for a built-to-suit in our park. And the same goes for being able to attract other customers from competing submarkets, Conshohocken, Radnor, and Center City. Last bullet point. Okay. What is necessary to attract office tenants, and what's our confidence for development? Okay. Well, we talked about it. They need flexibility for growth. And we need an amenity-rich community where people want to live, work, play, and grow. A community that supports a diverse age group, a community that supports events for residents on the weekends, and also events for workers at the end of the workday. And as for development, how confident are we? Well, we wouldn't be here if we weren't confident. And no one can predict the future. And what I'll tell you is, this is what we all need. We need to do a lot of hard work. We need to continue to collaborate with the community and the township. And so I'm here to invite all of you to the table and say, join us at the table and help us realize this vision. And now, I'm going to leave you with one fun fact. And this is the one fun fact. Martin Decker had a vision. In 1963, he bought from the Roberts family the 60 acres that we sit on in Bala Cynwyd. This image is up right here. Got it from the archives, okay? His vision was for a 3 million square foot satellite city. I mean, it's pretty impressive, right? That 60 years ago, this was Martin Decker's vision. And here we are today. So, I mean, how many of you have seen the movie The Lion King? Hopefully most of you, okay. Todd, you haven't seen The Lion King? Oh, you have, good, okay. All right, The Lion King, okay. So do you remember when Rafiki says to Simba in The Lion King, it is time? Okay, well, it is time to take Martin Decker's vision and bring it to fruition, only a much greener version of it, okay, with a lot more green space. But he had a lot of the right ideas. And I'm going to let Yaki Miodovnik tonight, who's going to step up next, who's our landscape architect. He's world-renowned. He does landscape architecture all over the world. Speak to this and speak to the vision of how our plan is really a landscape-driven plan and not just a building-driven plan. Thank you.
I would
Thank
just,
you, everyone.
thank you. I would just ask that we keep these presentations brief because I expect there'll be a decent amount of exchange. Thank you.
While we are doing the technical things, I will introduce myself. My name is Yaki
So
Miodovnik.
could you speak into the microphone, please?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. You can pick it up if you need to. That's fine.
My name is Yaki Miodovnik. I am a landscape architect, partner at Seed Design. I have more than 36 years of experience doing master planning for cities, campuses. And thank you for having me here. And I was lucky to be chosen by Tishman Spire to work on this project. I work with them in other places like in India, creating new cities. I will save you from listening to all the things that you were listening before, a lot of the analysis, but I'm going to try to remind you a little bit of the implementation of the vision that came up from Tishman Spire and see how we are going to tackle it. And I try to do it as soon as fast as I can. Oops. That's other. So.
Here's to Bala, everybody. This is the new storefront. You have to get back for 1 second.
Okay, sorry.
There it is. Looks good, right?
Okay, so what we are trying to do is to try to embrace the zoning that you worked on and created for the City Avenue district. So I won't go into details of it, but it's here and it's in the presentation that you could look at it later. Last February, I believe that I talked to you last time, that was the master plan, where we put together the master plan for the office, retail, and residential. You already heard quite a lot about it, and I'll save you from this. The phasing plan, you heard too. This is the vision, and the vision is to create a office, residential and office and commercial, multi-purpose community and development that is nestled in green, where the green is taking 1.5 million square foot of parking and turning it to 12 acres of parkland, creating a futuristic workplace where everyone can experience biophilic experience. It's the idea of people being able to identify with nature as we did for generations. The idea is to have an office space and residential space that everyone has a view of green, that's going to, based on studies, increase productivity, as well as reduce crime in communities. I just want to talk about what it means to have a high-class residential. Actually, I'm working more on the site, so I won't talk about the buildings, but the site and have a biophilic experience that it's not only for the people that live and work in the new development. This is open to the rest of the community. So connectivity, I showed before how porous the site is and how people can just walk into the community or drive into the community, be able to park. They will be able to connect to the other two new developments that are happening in the southwest corner of the site. And restoring the woodland that's is in age for succession. This is some of the ideas that we have in terms of dealing with stormwater, at the same time reviving this woodland. that's along Belmont Avenue. The path system that we are going to provide for the people that live in the neighborhood to be able to enjoy it and be an ADA accessible. Opportunities for different kind of community activities, from markets to outdoor cafes that people can be part of. Stormwater management. Stormwater management doesn't have to be a hole in the ground. It can be actually used in a very creative way. This is in Pittsburgh, in the university, where it becomes a place that people are coming and using, and becomes a place. And when we're talking about creating a community, gathering places are important. So creating abandoned places with different characters to suit different needs of people, that's part of the plan here. Again, places for meditation, talking about dealing with the issues of what we call landscape services, where the landscape is not only a beautiful place to look at and be in, it is serving in terms of utilities, stormwater management, and the other utilities can go through this space and easy to access when need to be fixed. We're talking about celebrating culture, and one is the amphitheater that you will see later, but the idea is that we have a lot of open space and different what we call outdoor rooms that can be used in different ways to accommodate different part of the communities for different kind of events and give you an opportunity to create a new culture. Places for people to, again, meditate, create a water system that is a healthy one, that dealing with flow, volume, and quality of water. Creating places for kids to be able to play and associate with water or touch things and be close in touch with nature. In the buildings, they're already having some restaurants that are operating, and people can come and be part of them. Just different ideas of how the place can be used in association with the water and the pond that is part of the water system. We are creating a amphitheater that will accommodate around 600 to 700 people for community gathering and different kind of activities that are associated with it, as well as possibilities to enjoy nature in different ways, crossing it, walking next to it. And the two Bala give us opportunity to create a small open mall, and those are different examples from around the world on projects. Some of them I worked on, and some of them I just took from the literature. And again, just completely different character, but it is another way of being able to create gathering places and for people to be in. And to remind you some of the views that we have as part of the vision. This is St. Asaphs Avenue or road, looking from the future roundabout towards the east, where we have the building is designed like this, that creates a lot of pockets, outdoor pockets, like the terrace here, where there would be some cafes where people can be at the edge of the development. And again, it's open for the rest of the community, so we are not gating ourselves in this development. We are opening and creating a lot of ways for people to access it. This is the new entrance that actually is already partially done. The left part of it would be done later on when the new building would come in phase one. This is at the corner of St. Asaphs and Belmont. This is a place to create another opportunity for people together to create special events, can be another kind of a market, and many other programs that could be developed around those open spaces that we are preparing for you. This is a look into the development on the north side of the Phase 1 building, and this is the vision of the streetscape. This is the Crescent new commercial road that is south of Bala that will occupy both sides of the street and maybe create some future opportunity for the Bala to enhance the commercial value of its first floor. And the village square. The village square become the center of the new community, where again you can get there by car, you can get there by walking. There is a transportation hub on City Avenue where people can come and enter the site and get to this place that's south and east of the South Office Tower. And the park, that's the core, the core of the community that's open again for the entire Lower Merion community for different kind of activities associated with water. And this is again third eye view on the development. And in the last 8 months, we had the opportunity to talk to you and to listen to some of your concerns, and we were studying those concerns. So there is this opportunity for planning changes as we move forward with the plan. So just to touch on a few of them. So this is
If I might, I'm sorry to interrupt you. The board has already been briefed on a lot of this, so
Okay.
I don't want to, because we don't normally ask but if you could just give us a very quick summary.
I'll give you
Thank
another
you.
2-3 minutes and I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
This is the previous plan. This is areas where we were listening and studying and trying to accommodate the needs of the township as well as the development. So changing location of gathering places, eliminating the parking that used to be in the park, and the garage at building C3. There is an issue with what would happen with the area that building C1 is occupying, and the idea of the temporary park moving there if the development sequence will happen. So that's another opportunity that we were studying, as well as I think the most important one was the realignment of the road that went through the village square. And now you can see that we took it out, so the space stands by itself. There is opportunity to move the hotel to the west, where I think it would work better with the development that is in the south west of the new development on the southwest of our property. And the idea of that until the C1 building is going to be built, there is a park, temporary park that will serve the community. So you can see how it would look like, where in particular the open space that the building C3 was taken out as a parking garage. And just to tell you that the work is already being done. I mean, there is work that trying to change the one already done to change the one Plaza to a Class A office space. So you can see that we provided all of those outdoor spaces to provide a new concept for work together, where people can take their computer and be outside and feel safe and productive. That's it. I try to do it as fast as I can.
Okay, thank you.
It doesn't work with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Al Fiscaldo, zoning counsel for Tishman, this project. I guess it's time for questions. Board had questions, I'm happy to entertain those now.
Okay, thank you. What we'd prefer to do, because some questions may be for you or for some of your experts or for our staff, is if you don't go away. But I think I'm going to make a few quick comments and then we'll turn it over and, so I don't know, I don't want to specifically ask commissioners for questions for you as opposed to.
No, I'm happy to, I think I could probably, as a
Okay.
team, we'll deal with any of the questions, but.
Okay, before we do that, is there anyone else who wanted to say anything?
No.
Okay, that's fine. So, okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
So, let me just make some very quick comments. I'm speaking for myself, but I believe I speak for some of my colleagues as well. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I believe that we are in agreement on the objective of bringing more business to Lower Merion and keeping business that is already here in the township. So I think that the township has this board and the township has the same goals. I certainly appreciate, and I think many of my colleagues do, the investment of Tishman Speyer over the years in this development, and also the commitment that your business tenants have shown to the township. And we certainly hope that will continue. I suspect that the questions and comments that you're going to hear will be focused in material part on ensuring that this plan that you've described is executed as it's been described. And that will probably be the focus rather than questions about whether our goals are the same, because I think that's probably the same for all of us. So I also, as long as I'm thanking you and your tenants, want to also recognize that several of my colleagues have worked very hard on this project over a course of months, and I want to just thank them. That's Commissioner Bernheim, Commissioner McComb, and President Sinai, who worked on as an informal subcommittee with all of you on this, and also with our staff, with Chris Leswing, Jillian Dirks, and our solicitor, Gil High. So thanks to all of you for that. So having said that, now I'm going to open it up to commissioner questions, comments. As I said, you'll have an opportunity now, and then we'll be getting into the specifics of the developers agreement and presumably the preliminary plan. So, President Sinai.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes, and thank you to all of the Tishman Speyer folks for the presentation. It's an exciting plan. I recall when it was here in tentative sketch, largely the view of the board was that was an exciting plan. And I want to echo just a couple things that Commissioner Grimes said, the first being to thank either a number of us who've kind of worked with a number of you on sort of some of these details, and that's Commissioner McComb, Commissioner Bernheim, Commissioner Grimes, and myself. Commissioner Grimes said that we share a vision for this area, and I'm just going to underscore that. I agree with you. I am one of the people who agree with him completely. Lower Merion should be a home for top-tier corporate tenants. Absolutely. This is a place they should be. In today's office environment, where we perhaps have more office than we have tenants, the tenants seem to be going to the very best places, right? Those are the offices that get actual tenants, and those are the tenants that we want. And so, when we as a township are thinking about what we're trying to achieve, it's not just occupancy, it's occupancy by really top tenants. It's a quality and caliber of the tenants, not just a quantity of them. I think what we're looking for to match what we are trying to achieve in the township. And I think certainly I recognize that in this part of Lower Merion that we've been looking at, there are missing pieces that need to be filled in to make it appealing to high caliber tenants. And that's kind of, I think, what we're talking about. We should easily be better than Conshohocken or King of Prussia. I think the bones here are better. And we have the 2012 zoning that seems to have delivered additional development, but generally in the form of residential, right? As opposed to the other mixes and mixed use. And if you're going to have a live, work, play environment, it needs to be more than just live. We need to have the work and play that goes along with it, because it is the synergies between those uses that seem to generate the vibrancy that we're looking for. And so that's certainly my hopes from this. And so the first thing that I come from is that I will have some questions about the plan, but most of my interest is in the developer's agreement, where the township is being asked to commit to preserving the fundamental aspects of bulk and area standards for a while, for a reason I understand, which is to provide certainty for investors that what they're going to invest in, they will be able to actually do, and the rug's not going to get pulled out from them later. Like, I definitely get that. And so the question is are we there? And I have just something that I've observed. So when we saw this in tentative sketch, I have a question either for you or for Mr. Rosenzweig. The promises were retail, right? That was one of the big elements of it, was retail. Another was the public gathering space, the village square, which kind of have the gravity of the placemaking. A third was the park and amphitheater as sort of a broad amenity. And the fourth was office development, right? This was all sort of designed to create an environment where Class A office tenants would be interested in coming. So when we look at the developer's agreement, which I'm not going to get into the details, I think we've all had the ability to review them. One of the things that in the last round kind of disappeared as one of the early, key elements, one of the early priority elements, which was, in the first 8 years, in the first 5, it would either be 2 residential buildings and some amenities, or a hotel and some amenities, but there used to be 2 residential and a commercial element. And that commercial element kind of anchored the curving end of the commercial as you went there. And so I would, and maybe this is the question for Mr. Rosenzweig, okay, you fully buy into the vision that like one of the key drivers that makes this area go is the retail activity that it basically is like an attractor for the people in the area and for the people around. It needs to be that attractor to make this area vibrant, to sort of create the locational value about the other buildings that are near it, right? Like that's the whole goal, right? You want office tenants to be here because there's actually something going on. And so it strikes me as important to have the full complement of commercial space there, especially to create a way to activate that entire curving of the street, as opposed to sort of having it peter out into a park with nothing on the other side, right? And so I guess the first question is can we get that back in?
So, President Sinai, if to the extent by that question you mean building C1.
Yeah, I do mean building C1.
Speak into the mic, please.
Yes.
President Sinai, if to the extent by that question you mean to implicate building C1.
That's exactly what I mean, yeah.
The answer is a clear and concise yes, we can.
Okay.
Okay,
Great.
and I would say to you that we can and will amend the developer's agreement to have building C1 travel with R1A and R1B.
Perfect.
But I do want to remind you and the other commissioners that R1A and R1B do have ground floor retail as well. Mm-hmm. So, but building C1 is, from my perspective and clearly from yours, the way to kind of perfect that, kind of gateway area. And your request is duly noted, and the answer is yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I think it's a significant chunk of the retail, and I think it's important for circulation, and I'm glad we're in agreement. So I'm going to have 2 more asks, both of which are in the spirit of I think the vision that Mr. Rosenzweig and Ms. Giuliani espoused for this area, which is the intent being to create the opportunity for top-tier corporate tenants to want to come in and sort of create the where to create the fertile ground for that. There is a transitional park, okay, or an interim park in here. Now this interim park, so let me back up a second. One of the key elements I thought from tentative sketch was this village square, right? And the village square was, one of the important amenities for the area when we think of amenities for the township. One of the things that the developers agreement has in it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, none of the stuff that you showed us on that plan, has to be built, right? We are going to approve it. It will give you the opportunity to develop it if you want to, and certainly not a requirement. Now, in order to preserve your, the existing zoning, you protect it from change in the future, you have to deliver some of the elements along the way to preserve that. But you could decide, nah, you don't want to do it, and you could just stop, right? And so one of the things that I previously asked the group is, as a township, one of the things that I think we should think about is, well, what happens if it only gets partway through, right? Best intentions, and all that, sometimes it just doesn't materialize. And one of the elements that struck me as being very important for the health and vitality of the entire regional center area would be that we have that kind of gathering area or some replacement for it, right? And it became tricky for the reasons that you guys said, which is well, you pave you create the parking there. You have existing parking there. It creates a little difficulty in how you arrange things on the site and how you move things in and out. And so the village square doesn't come until a little later in this development. Effectively, if you find an office tenant, the village square shows up. Is how I read it. And that was an important amenity, I think, for this board in tentative sketch. And so the replacement for it was this interim park, which makes sense. And then the question is, well, what happens if the interim turns out to be permanent? What happens to that? And my sense is that no one's really interested in spending a lot of money on a park that if you find an office tenant, you're going to have to tear up and put a building on top of. And so the question is, it would be wonderful if that doesn't materialize, that there'd be something like a second phase to say, okay, that's not happening. We're not getting that office tenant, but so what we're going to do is kind of finish what we started and make that interim park into a permanent caliber park, right? That's what would happen. So from my perspective, that's an extremely important element here, that we do not just say the first phase is just going to be building some apartment buildings in a temporary park, and after 5 years, that temporary park is just going to kind of wither away if we don't do anything else. That at that point, if the rest of the deal doesn't go through, there is something backstopping it that says we can convert that park to permanent, and there are enough resources there to make it a real park to go along with those buildings that actually got created in that very first step, the R1 and R2 and C1. And maybe, again, that's a question for you.
So President Sinai, I've never liked the characterization of this, I'll use the term transitional park rather than interim, because this is no small undertaking. I want everybody to understand that the cost of creating this is in the many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and this is not being treated as something that will disintegrate or fall apart after a short period of time. I mean, it is being built to the standard to couple with the existing basketball court so that it creates additional active play area for members of the community who are already oversubscribing to the basketball court that was voluntarily placed. And it also creates passive areas for particularly the residents of some of the condominiums and apartments that already exist surrounding, who tend to be older, a place for them to passively enjoy green space and benches and things of that sort, in addition to the trails which we've agreed to do, so that there's a walking opportunity. But to the, and of course, it's a great opportunity to reiterate that office is Tishman Speyer's sweet spot, right? It's actually what they want to do most, although the lead time for it is long. It is their premier product. I would say to you that there's an overwhelming interest in the hotel. It would not surprise me personally if the hotel isn't the first of the buildings rather than R1A and R1B, but we'll see what the market permits. I think we are very open to the notion that if we don't build the office and the associated amenities, which you've described and which we all want to have created, and an office building is a priority improvement. You know, in order for us to have any of the rights to phase 2. So again, great opportunity for me to remind you all, Tishman is putting at risk all of the development on 2 Bala, which is all multifamily resi, if we don't actually deliver with our commitments in phase 1. And phase 1 is 15 years, and phase 2 is only 5 years. So the whole thing is built into 20. But everything on phase 2, which is at the 2 Bala site, is at risk if we don't deliver at least 1 office building, President Sinai. But we are open to the notion of upgrading, doing a second phase of that transitional park in the event that in the timeline as permitted, you know, we cannot build because of what would be market conditions, you know, either one of those office towers and the associated amenity, which you know, Al would know best what we call that. The Village Square. Yeah, thank you. I sometimes muddle the amenities. I want to make sure we're all talking apples and apples. So the Village Square. So, but I think we are very open to what I'll call a physical upgrade that would be at developer's cost. You know, in the event that we can't do that. We can't do Village Square when we can't do an office building. And I think we could build that language in and make those provisions. I think we're open to that, but I don't want that to imply that there's anything not first class about this transitional park, which also is being offered in acknowledgement of the fact that Bala Park itself can't be built until certain things happen because of the amount of infrastructure underneath Bala Park. And if we were to build Bala Park and then we have to build another building, we have to rip up Bala Park. And that is only, it's bad for the township, it's bad for the community. You know, here's a park one day, there's no park the next because we have to rip it up to do a building. And it's also bad for the developer. I mean, it's just cost ineffective. So we collectively conceived of this transitional park as the amends to the notion that Bala Park really has to come at a point in time where we can create it and not rip it up. And if things go well with the priority improvements, then Bala Park will come sooner rather than later, whatever that means. But so we're open to that. That's a long-winded answer, but there are a lot of pieces to that because it isn't that simple. But the answer is we're open to that second stage park process for the transitional park that would upgrade it further in the event we can't do the rest.
Okay, thank you. That would be very important to me. I think that, you know, you're not very comfortable relying on making it to year 15 or 20 for you know, the key amenities to be delivered, and so to have this be there in case we don't make it that far would be terrific. And you and I and everyone here, like, I think all hope that what was up on the screen is exactly what ends up getting built, and we end up in that. You know, I certainly hope that the interim park ends up getting dug up and turned into an office building, and that would be terrific. And the only reason that I called it interim was just in the developers agreement. There is some language that I can't quote exactly that says, you know, we're going to recognize that, you know, it's only temporary and it's going to be sort of done to that degree. And that language was in there, otherwise it would not have occurred to me.
Well, and that's perfectly understandable. Yeah. And what I'm trying to say is we can address that language.
Perfect.
But it really hasn't been designed, and Yaki can testify to the fact that the first 3 or 4 iterations of what it was going to be were summarily rejected, not because he doesn't always do beautiful work, but because we were looking for something more evolved and more prone to being a durable, useful element in the community.
So thank you very much, and don't sit down, because I have one more thing, because
all right,
you know,
I don't know if my response to this one more thing will be as enthusiastically accepting, but let me have it.
Well, we will try, because I think you know, as you can see, I haven't really talked about the plan. I talked about what Commissioner Grimes said, which is the implementation of the plan. Actually, we see this beautiful plan, and the township's commitment to this that you're asking for is that we commit to preserve the zoning effectively, the key elements, the bulk and area standards, what you can build, how much you can build, et cetera. And we're all familiar with the idea of options, right? Options are when you have the right to do something, but you don't have the obligation to, right? And so that becomes an option for Tishman, right? They have the right to develop for up to 20 years, up to preserving the existing zoning, but with no obligation, right? There's at any point you decide, hey, we don't want this anymore, you could just stop. The only risk that Bala is being put to is the risk that the zoning changes, because you're not risking losing that parcel, you're just risking losing the grandfathering of the existing zoning. You can develop two blocks. If this disappeared, you could develop those. You could do regular land development for those apartment buildings.
So yes, President Sinai, except for two things.
Yeah.
Okay. Once any part of this begins to be developed, there's an interconnectivity, so that you can't just ignore the fact that one building has been constructed, because it's constructed in relationship to a complicated plan, which would foreclose, bad word when you're talking about real estate, which would obviate other paths under existing zoning. Second point, to just respond to that, although I appreciate the underlying point, is that for those, particularly Commissioner Kramer, who might not have been here at the time, so the old zoning, the zoning that was the 2012 iteration that was replaced sometime after 2018 because of the amendments to the City Avenue district, not because of your new zoning code per se. But the old zoning permitted about 3 million square feet of construction on this site. Obviously, you got a plan that doesn't contemplate that, because it is way more green, has way more amenities, and is way more Lower Merion standard than that kind of a dense urban plan would have been. Under the current zoning, interestingly, we could build kind of the same square footage that we're compromising agreeing to build. Yes, on some level it's an option, but on some level you have a developer whose sweet spot is office saying this is the only way we get to meaningful Class A office development. Otherwise we wouldn't be wasting everybody's time and energy. We'd just come in with 1,800 apartments over ground floor retail like every other stinking building that's been built lately, and we wouldn't put anybody through the brain damage. So we don't lose a whole lot. And the commitment that Lower Merion is making to us is, and again, I use this with a small p, is partnering with us to try to foster the environment in which we can get you something other than multifamily resi with ground floor retail. And we believe in that formula so much that we're willing to put a whole lot of multifamily at risk at the end of the day under the plan. Now, we're arguably either in a recession or heading into one. In the commercial real estate industry, I can tell you that there's a discussion of there being an active recession. I mean, it isn't theoretical, it's recession, and everybody is recession planning. I don't know, Al doesn't know, Janet doesn't, none of us know what that looks like. I think inner ring suburban office is actually going to be a strong survivor and shining moment within whatever might be an otherwise challenging economy because of this move back to the inner ring suburbs that most experts in the field are expecting and we're already seeing. So Yeah, on some level, sure, I can't argue that there isn't some optionality to it. On the other hand, you know, what's the risk? What's the mutual risk between the township and the developer here? Because the developer could come in and not lose a whole lot by doing multifamily resi like everybody else. It's not what we do. So we're trying to create that, and the township is I think, trying to honor that notion that City Avenue District was formed in the first place to honor, which is, how do we actually get this to come to Lower Merion and not go elsewhere?
So I think this partnership word is a terrific one.
Yeah, smart.
I think that's what we're looking to do. I think it's extremely important. But it is not lost to me that the presentation has been about how do we get Class A, office tenants here. But what the current developers agreement does is says, guarantee us our residential development. And so here's what I would suggest in the spirit of partnership, that if this is about guaranteeing the certainty that if a Class A tenant materializes, who knows if they will, like no obligation for you to like have to deliver such a building. But if that materializes, then the zoning is preserved, right? And so what would that look like? That would look like the remaining residential after the first wave of hotel and residential gets built. The remaining residential that can be developed under the grandfathered zoning, as long as one of the office buildings is being developed, right? If that Class A office doesn't materialize, no harm, no foul, then it's just a residential development. You don't need the commitment. You can just do that, like you said, right? So that would be what the grandfather is for, and so they would be tied. And I appreciate that you can't build an office building on spec first. No one can, right? And so
not these days.
Yeah, and so I appreciate that. Like if someone's going to invest in it, they have to believe that the zoning will be guaranteed. And so I personally would be willing to do that. But it would have to be in the spirit of your initial presentation, which is the goal here is to get Class A involved, office involved with this mixed use, right? So you're developing an office building, and we do that. And the current developers agreement doesn't say that.
Yeah.
The current developers agreement says you can do any use.
Yeah. It doesn't. What the current developers agreement says is that there are certain priority buildings that have to be built in a time frame to get on to the next phase.
Yep.
It also does designate the order of certain things, so that if R1A and R1B and now C1,
Yep.
right, which
Yep.
I promised on behalf of Tishman, were to be built, then the next building under the developers agreement has to be either a hotel or an office building, right? That's what the developers agreement says.
The next one has to be a hotel.
No, it doesn't. It says hotel or office.
Or the office building, right?
Right?
Yeah, okay.
Yep, so there is that next step, has to be something that's not multifamily resi. But I'm gonna push back in the way I have to, because the whole thing has to evolve in response to the market. And that's always been our concern. And your proposal would incentivize us if we can't get the next office building in a time frame and it holds up any other development under this plan, which is a plan, as I think Chris described, that the township wants, so that you have an orderly rollout of 2.1 million square feet, regardless of what the character of that 2.1 million square feet is. By character, I mean office or retail or, hotel or multifamily resi. I don't mean, is it lovely or is it not lovely? But you would then encourage us, if we can't get that tenant, to at that point kick over our own plan, which we would have the right to do, and then just file the biggest multifamily resi plan we could do at the time. So what I would say to you is that while I appreciate the motivation of your idea, and I appreciate where it's coming from, here is where I will have to ask the board to take a leap of faith with you know, with not just Tishman, who's been with the property for 16, 17 years, but with Janet Giuliani, who was representing this property before Tishman acquired it, right? And has been with this property for what, Janet, 65 years? A long time. A really long time. So, you know, and Janet is, she said, a Lower Merion girl. She's been with this property for much of her career. And to take that leap of faith that we're going to do our damnedest to try to find that office tenant, because it's actually what motivates us, although the hotel may be the lower hanging fruit. And again, it may be lower hanging fruit than even R1A and R1B and C1, right? But we can recognize how that creates the sense of place. And to accept the notion, and I'm not telling you you have to, I'm asking you to consider accepting the notion that trying to tie any pieces of the future development beyond what's a priority improvement to a threshold that you need to cross to build any other next building is kind of meddling with the free market of it, and would actually wind up getting you the thing you don't want, which is okay, we're done with the plan, so now maybe we have to upgrade the transitional park, and we're gonna see what zoning is at the time, and we're gonna build what we can build, and we're gonna kind of disregard the rest. And to me, that would be a shame after going through all this planning exercise of buildings in a certain place, of a certain scope, you know, with bubble footprints, meaning, you know, they're generally located in the place where they'll be, although they could pivot a little bit within the bubble. And it doesn't seem to me to be the way to actually do this. Although, again, I appreciate where you're trying to go.
So
there's
just
going to be
to
that
make
little
sure I
leap
understand you
of-
correctly, because you did come here and tell us how we were missing out on getting, I think, several Class A tenants over the past 10 years or so. And I completely appreciate that. Who knows when the next one will show up, and we certainly wouldn't bind you to that. But you were saying that it is extremely important that the township preserve not just the zoning ability for the office, but also the residential. Because if the office doesn't show up, it's important that you build the residential, because the office might show up later, and that you don't trust the township to I guess, you have zoning that would support that in the future, and so we need to commit for 20 years, but like, we should take this on faith for that.
Let's be honest, I don't think this is a reflection of this board, but, you know, one of the things that was shared with me, and candidly, I don't remember if it was you, President Sinai, who shared it, or one of the other commissioners, was when we were looking for an even longer time frame. You know, it was, well, who can even think that long, right? Who amongst us here today can think about what 30 years from now looks like? And, you know, I think it's easier to look at a 15-year arc and then with the second leg of 5 years. But in a 15-year arc, where you're talking about certain buildings happening, hopefully first and second and third, and R1A, R1B, C1, the hotel, right? By the time all of that comes together, you're at 5 years, right? And then you have this, I mean, it's not that 10 years isn't a long time, but it's in the development world, a very common planning mark. And, you know, although again, you may want to get this directly from Janet, you know, I can tell you in what I do every day that the arc of the sourcing, location, negotiation, financing, planning, construction, and then shovel in the ground. Forget about actual construction time, but the construction planning all the way through for a large commercial tenant can be easily 2.5 years, and sometimes more. So if you're actually looking at that and pretend that, you know, on a magic day we have approval of entry into a development agreement, you know, what happens day one is not just, okay, what's getting built first, but what happens day one is, you know, how do we begin to get that next tenant and make sure that that next tenant, that next Class A tenant, Lower Merion grade tenant, comes here and not elsewhere. So all of that is going to happen, and it's going to happen on some level You've got to trust the experts who know how to do this, and to believe, there's a certain amount of belief here, that a developer whose product this is going to be able to devote its resources to trying to make that happen, because that's actually sweet spot. That's what the portfolio wants, right? A hotel's very nice, right? But a hotel does not Tishman's portfolio make. It's 130 million square feet of Class A commercial office space across the world. That's what their portfolio is made of.
Well,
Including
thank you.
a
I've taken
million
enough
square feet in our backyard.
Yeah, I've taken enough time, and I appreciate the.
I'm doing the best I can with that one. I was happy to give you much more responsive, agreeable answers to 1 and 2. That one is the one that no matter what any of us were to say, the folks who actually do the development work and planning work say, if you tie my hands, it's the biggest problem I've got.
So I will cede my time momentarily. I will just say that to me there seems to be no tying of hands in that particular proposal, in that everything is still on the table and there. It's just part and parcel of delivering the bundle, right? And the bundle is the mixed-use office and residential bundle, which seems to be the vision that everyone has espoused about high caliber. And so I will confess that it causes me great concern that if it's people that who are not in this room who are unwilling to say, yes, we also believe in that bundle, and instead are saying, no, what needs to be on paper is a commitment to preserve for 15 years at least, and possibly 20, but at least 20 would come with office. So 15 years of existing residential zoning, and who knows if that would ever change. I have no idea, but the markets change, townships change, right? So it's a real commitment to that preservation. I honestly, it does not compute why it would not be straightforward and simple to say, yes, of course, like the only reason we need to do the back half of the residential is because we are also doing an office and we're trying to develop this whole thing together. But thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Other commissioner questions, comments? Vice President Gavin, please.
Thank you very much. And President Sinai, thank you. That was very helpful, and to all of you who've worked with Tishman, very much appreciated. I want to even take a step back because I'm confused about this whole plan. We've spent the last hour and a half talking about Tishman, focusing on office, right, and being a wonderful developer of office product. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that you're in the township. I think that's absolutely true. We heard from Ms. Giuliani, $120 million investment in what's already there. Yet we're starting with the first buildings to be built, potentially a hotel, but the first buildings to be built are 200 residential units. We heard from our staff that between the new development we've seen in Lower Merion and on the Philadelphia side of City Line Avenue, we've seen 3,000 new units being built in the last few years. Why on earth is Tishman building another 200 residential units when you are a residential tenant? We heard from Mr. Rosenzweig that there are companies that are dying to get out of Philadelphia. I'd love to hear who these publicly present. Obviously nothing confidential, but you've mentioned that there are companies that have publicly stated they cannot wait to get out of Philadelphia when their lease ends. Who are these companies, and why is that not driving immediate office? Because there's this need for these Class A tenants. This doesn't even make, the staging of it from the very beginning doesn't even make sense to me.
I think the answer is placemaking. I think that's something that staff has pointed to, and I think the subcommittee was focused on in our discussions. And I think Montgomery County Planning Commission in their review letter also, had focused on the corner of St. Asaphs and Belmont as the integral piece to go first, to create a sense of place, to create a beginnings of an environment that will foster the office development. So that corner piece has been identified early on as the priority to start to create this park.
So in order to attract Class A office tenant, we need another 200 residential units here. The office wouldn't be attracted by the $120 million of investment, by having a park, by having the commercial building, by having a hotel. That's not enough. We need 200 more residential units to create a place that's appropriate for a Class A office tenant.
So I think this property is unique in that it's this a place unto itself. You know, it's 65 acres, and also it's part of the surrounding community. And in order to create, you know, a live work play environment on this property, you know, and you know, adjacent to the Keystone and Federal developments, you need people, and you need things that are going to draw people, and so people living there and commercial retail development along with those you know, apartments is going to draw people there and create the environment that the RCA district was drafted to facilitate.
So we need people and we need something to draw people. Makes complete sense. Jillian, I have a question for you. You showed an early slide with a bunch of stars kind of around the property of other development projects, I think.
Yes.
I don't know how our technology is tonight, if that's easy to pull back up.
It is.
How far are some of those development projects from this site? Is it blocks? Is it miles? Is it feet?
Are these,
Like the ones we've recently, you know, the apartment units that we've recently approved?
111 presidential.
How far is 111 presidential?
Excuse me.
111
No.
presidential, let me just pull up the.
My point is basically, we have the people, right? We've talked about, there are 3,000 units in this area. I get your point. We need people, we need something to draw the people. Apartment buildings aren't going to draw people who live in surrounding buildings, right? Because they already have an apartment, right? They're living in surrounding buildings. So Jillian, sorry I cut you off.
No, it's fine.
Go.
I think this is the slide you're referring to. This
Yeah.
is actually existing residential.
Okay. So on the bottom left, right? That's like the furthest away of the existing resident. I'm blind. I apologize. Getting older. How far is that from this site?
I would say it's probably a 10-minute walk, 15-minute walk.
Okay. Not unreasonable to do, right? You have people. I'm not going to add up those numbers. One, because I just took off my glasses, I can't see them. But I'm not going to add up all those numbers. Those are high numbers there. You have people. You need something to draw the people. The hotel, the commercial, the restaurants. How do the apartment buildings fit into that piece of drawing people to that site?
So I think again, this is a 65-acre parcel in and of itself. And so to create the live, work, play environment on that parcel, you need to have people, right? And to have people to be able to walk to work, to be able to have people on the street and have a vital, you know, atmosphere that creates a sense of security for people. I think that, you know, those residential buildings have been there for quite some time, I think. Some of them are new. But the office hasn't come. And so again, this is an opportunity to create an environment with all of the greenery and all the amenities, and to create a sense of place where people are gonna come. And I think the residential component is an essential piece of that, and I think that, you know, the planning experts agree with that as well.
That's where I'm getting lost. I get the landscaping, I get this open space, I get all of that drawing the people. That's not a question for me. I don't doubt that at all. I don't understand how building an apartment building for a developer that specializes in office is what draws people to that site. It gets more people, right? It gets a couple hundred more units of people. But from what I'm seeing there of over 1,000 units within a 10-minute, well, the furthest is a 10-minute walk. I don't understand how an apartment building is a draw for more people.
So I think you have a good point, and this is only one level of information that one needs to have in order to tackle this issue. So when we talk about urban design, we are trying to see how adjacencies of properties are working together in harmony, just to create an office place in this corner where it's dark at night, where there is across the street a high-rise full of light and people. It's not only to provide, the office place would be provide a place for people to work, and you get all the people that are sitting 15 minutes away. It is how the experience of creating a place is becoming realized, and how it becomes vibrant and create all of those other elements of community, safety, the sense of how the place function. If you would have an office space, it would be dark tower at night. I think when you talk about Asaphs as a major artery, you talk about the residential community alongside, then it makes sense to have a residential community right at the corner. Now, why we start at the corner? So the site itself has 2 watersheds, and if you need to start somewhere and create a buzz, then I think, and show the community that there is something happening, then I think creating this piece first would do it. And creating a commercial enterprise associated with it at the first floor would bring people into the property itself. And because of, again, the issue of investment of utilities, it makes sense to start there and go clockwise around the property to build the rest of the building. That's why Office South and Office North are coming next in place, because they are inside and they won't have the same impact on the urban fabric of this corner if it would be dark and not used during, for example, after work hours. So I think that there were other reasons why we started there and why we decided to go with residential and not with an office space.
Sorry, thank you. And I appreciate that you don't want a dark space that gets vacant at night. I spent a summer living in Cincinnati. The city shuts down at 6 p.m. Nobody's there. So I understand that. However, to build an apartment building when we've already been inundated, because this district, which was supposed to incent this live, work, play, as President Sinai said, has only been live. It has not worked out how we've wanted it to as a township. It has only been live. To add more apartments, essentially, so that it's safety, right? We could put lights in there and do that a lot less expensively. There are other things. There's restaurants you could put in. There's retail. There are things you can put in that aren't residential to give use at night. And I'm not going to go back and forth and argue with you. I understand your point, but I'm a little frustrated that what I've heard tonight, presentation was office, 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 and what I'm seeing is residential, residential, some commercial, and then down the road maybe office. I think Commissioner or President Sinai's idea of if you need to put that residential in to make it financially viable for Tishman, I understand that. You know, this is not a charity project. Obviously, as much as you love Lower Merion, and you've been a resident of Lower Merion, and you also work for Tishman. Tishman is not a 501c3. You need to make money, and I get that. But to say, hey, the focus of this is office, but not kind of guarantee additional office doesn't make any sense to me. So I think that suggestion where, okay, if you need this residential at the start, I don't like it. However, I understand the market forces that may require that. But to say we could potentially build all this residential without having any additional office space doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't seem like it would make sense to you as a company that focuses on office development.
Well, they could, I mean, just to finish on the point, they could build all the resi now. Under the current zoning. So the goal of this plan is not to sneak resi into the township. We could do that now if we wanted to. The goal is to create.
And you are. I mean, you are building 200 residential units.
Sure, but in a larger construct of creating a place where the office product that hasn't come to the township for the last 2 decades decides to come here. And so it's not just about putting in resi-family units. It's about creating the place and putting in the amenities and the plazas and the parks.
Yes, put in the plazas, put in the parks, put in all. I'm not arguing with that. That's what I want to see.
Those things have to be amortized with other construction. And
Right.
so each of the buildings in agreement is tied to a certain amenity. So with each building comes certain amenities. With R1, A and B, and C1 comes Gateway Plaza, Lower Terrace, and the Transitional Park. With Office South comes the Village Square. With the hotel come the trail. So it comes in pieces to come together as a whole to create an environment where people are going to come.
Right.
And businesses want to come.
And it has to come together as a whole.
It has to.
Right. So
but the more elements you put in, the more amenities you put in, that an office tenant, his employees or her employees are going to utilize. The more amenities that are there, they're on the ground, like in Conshohocken, like at the Navy Yard, like in King of Prussia. We don't have them here. So to have them in place, that's the beacon. That's the light that the moth comes to.
And if you said we want to put in 700,000 square feet of Class A office space, along with a park, along with 8 restaurants, along with commercial space, along with all of that, I don't think anyone on this board would stop you for a second. That would be wonderful. It's the linchpin of this being the residential is the starting point, and with the promise of 500 more units down the road, that's the part that is not jiving with everything that I'm hearing tonight.
So it's not the promise of 500. The two Bala piece only comes online if there's an office building built. So it's not another 500 units. It's another couple hundred.
Or is it office or hotel, right?
No.
Or no.
No. In order to proceed to phase 2, right? It's R1A and R1B.
Right.
Office South or Office North, and the amenities that come with them, and then two other buildings, whether that be the hotel or something else. So in order to activate all the resi on C2 in phase 2 on 2 Bala, you need to have R1A and R1B, that corner, right, and C1, an office tower, north or south, and the amenities, and 2 other buildings, one of which will almost certainly be the hotel because there's been so much interest in that. So it's not like there's another 500 units. Just C2 doesn't, or phase 2 doesn't happen until the township gets what it wants in terms of an office.
So then educate me, and I apologize for my stupidity here. Educate me on why there was pushback on President Sinai's request of the office having to go in. Is that what I just heard from you, or no? Did I hear something different? Am I mistaking two things?
It's different issues. So there's 2 phases to the plan, right? Phase 1 is 1 and 3 Bala. Phase 2, and that's a 15-year phase. Phase 2 is 2 Bala across the street. There's resi only on 2 Bala, and there's the rest of it on 1 and 3. And so in order for phase 2 to become viable, to be able to be activated under the developer's agreement, there's a benchmark that the developer has to hit in terms of putting buildings online. And those are the corner piece, 1 of the office towers, and 2 other buildings. So all of that resi on 2 Bala is completely at risk if we don't come through on an office building.
Okay, so then what was President Sinai asking for that you guys were not willing to?
I believe he wanted a guarantee that we couldn't do anything else on any other building on 1 and 3 Bala until after R1.
So the rest of the residential.
300 residential.
Okay, so I apologize, not the 500 residential, it was 300 additional residential.
Something like that.
Okay, so same point, different number. I don't understand why that pushback. You guys are about office development. We want office development to say, hey, this next 300 units, not 500 units, these next 300 units aren't coming online until that office that you want, that we want, comes on. Why not?
But even if they did come online, aside from an office building coming before it, there's amenities that come with those pieces as well.
Sure.
And so amenities that you wouldn't get if they just stuck in a by right plan for just resi. So all the amenities, the pretty park in the middle, that comes online, in piecemeal as buildings get developed. We could, if we wanted to do all resi, we could.
You've said that. I know you could.
Okay.
I know you could.
But there's benefits. But there's benefits.
To.
There's benefits as each piece comes online.
Right.
To the community as a whole.
Okay. Understood. We talked about the comparison to Navy Yard to Conshohocken and Amerisource Bergen, when they built the Amerisource in Conshohocken, is that, I don't know, you guys probably know better than I do, is that residential and office, or did they just build an office building?
Yeah, so that's, Commissioner Cameron, that's a 400 and some odd thousand square foot office building. There is an adjacent hotel,
Okay.
Which I actually think is a separate structure. And it was on a separate lot because I was involved in the negotiation of that underlying land and the church that sits next to it. So, but there was no residential component. If you know the site, there's new multifamily resi going up a block away. So it is within the same kind of distance parameters. And it was extremely important in the community discussions that live, work, play environment, which I don't think quite gets it right. And I don't think that portrayal is what Lower Merion would want to see. But that the resi is a block away, the hotel is there adjacent, and the 400 and some odd thousand square foot office building is freestanding. And that's the way that was built. And the office building, if I recall, has ground floor retail. So,
Okay. Yep.
and
Yeah,
if I
that's
could
right.
have just a quick minute, the quickest minute I know how to do. First of all, you should know that Tishman also focuses a lot on retail. So I don't want to create the impression that Tishman is only an office developer. It's the majority of and bulk of their portfolio. But retail is an extremely critical aspect of what they do, and they take it very seriously. So that it is not a throwaway, it is not a casual component, it is a mission-critical component of this plan and project. And then quickly to address maybe a nuance of what you were asking about President Sinai's request, which is that, you know, there be some condition that requires the building of an office building on some degree, whatever building means, whether that means, you know, shovel in the ground, whether that means, you know, halfway through, whatever that means, before another building could be started. No matter how you slice it, that's kind of a dictating of market forces in a plan that we see as we've got 15 years to develop and deliver to you all, to the community, certain things that we must do. And if we don't, and one of those things is one of the office buildings, and if we don't, then we've put a whole big chunk of our plan at risk, and it just goes away, right? It just goes away, and that's how we view it. But to condition one building on another in a plan that we've already accommodated the request to shrink the time frame for and to make it as marketable as possible is just something that, you know, is hard for us to digest, given that in every community that we've developed of mixed use, right? In anywhere in the world, that request is not part of the deal, right? It just isn't. So, and Janet can bear me out, it could be, you name your country, you name your place, you name your city, bigger developments than this, and nobody tries to dictate the connection of those things because they understand what the developer is trying to do and what the developer wants to achieve through its own financial motivation. And let's face it, this developer, this applicant, my client, is financially motivated in a material way to actually deliver. We don't do well if we sit on our hands. We don't do well to watch an office building not built. So on some level, yeah, you're buying into a program that requires a little bit of a leap of faith, but is really not unlike any other building that you approve or could approve that would be a freestanding building. The only difference is rather than under the MPC, where we have 5 years of protected interest, then, you know, we've got 15 years of protected interest here. And I'll put this to you all for your consideration. Don't throw anything at me. Okay? If you're so troubled by this developer's agreement, take away the condition of approval that requires a developer's agreement, give us your approvals, give us 5 years. That's what the MPC requires. Okay, and by the way, you've either incentivized us to build like mad, or you've approved us into a recession that doesn't allow us to do much during 5 years, in which case we have to hit the reset button, start over, and come in at some point with another plan, right? Or you've taken away the township's entire ability to control 2.1 million square feet of development over a time that I don't think you want to happen in 5 years.
Well, as we've said, nobody wants to, and I apologize
No,
also.
so I'm
taking up a lot
just
of time, and I
trying to give you
appreciate
that
it.
flavor because the
understand.
interference with the market forces of how we do this.
I get it. So here's the thing though, like, to say we're interfering with the market forces, a developer's agreement by nature is an interference with the market forces, right? We're locking in the next 20 years. We're not saying, hey, let's just see what happens. So, and I don't want to go back and forth on this, and to the point of everywhere else in the world is doing this, we are not, I will say, we are not a podunk town that doesn't know what we're doing. I mean, this is the chair of the real estate development department in the world's #1 business school, period. President Sinai is knows what he's talking about. I think we all have faith in him. I understand that Tishman is a world-class, you have a world-class organization here, and we're trying to do what's right both for you and for the township and for everybody. I think everything you said points to, of course, this is what's going to happen. I don't understand, on one hand, well, it's going to happen anyway, so have a leap of faith and let's not bother. On the flip side, it's going to happen anyway, so put it into the agreement, because that's what's going to happen anyway. So that's where I'm leaning. We have seen this City Avenue district, this plan that we wanted to see this live, work, play happen, and it hasn't. We've taken a leap of faith. It hasn't worked. It's led to residential development after residential development without, as you guys have said, without office development that we've wanted to see. You've made a huge investment in office development. We want to see you keep doing that. We want to see you keep doing the residential. But what I'm seeing and hearing today isn't that. I mean, I've heard there is this burning desire for office tenants right now, even in this economy, but then 2 minutes later I hear there's not.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Mr. Rosenzweig, he's making comments.
I'm not going to speak unless I'm recognized, so I just was getting up to respond, but I don't have to.
Yeah, I'm trying to be respectful. This is not, as you won't know because you sat in this seat, this is not a debate, and I would just encourage my colleagues and the applicants to recognize that these are questions that should be answered, but not a lot more than that, because respectfully, we need to spend time on this, but we've had 2 commissioners in over an hour.
Yeah. So thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, I
Please
appreciate it.
finish.
And my next question is actually for Chris and/or Jillian about approving a preliminary plan at this point, where you said early on, Chris, we don't kind of fully have the stormwater worked out, we don't have the traffic worked out, and I understand that each building would have to come back for us. The problem I've seen so far over the past few years when we've approved various developments in this area has been, well, we're only lending a little bit to the traffic, and we're like each one on its own. Every time, if each building has to come back to do the traffic for that specific building is one thing, versus we're saying we have this vision. We're all trying to buy into this overall vision. What will this do to the traffic in the area if it's built out in its entirety? And do we have the appropriate plan for that, or can we have the appropriate plan for that?
That's a really great question, and we're very fortunate this evening to actually have Brian Keaveney from the Township Engineer's Office, who's going to be much more familiar with this about the traffic.
Great, love to hear from him. We're always fortunate when we're joined by Brian.
While Brian's coming up, it is one of those things that staff as planners and the engineers have looked at, to try to look at the location of the curb cuts, to look at the circulation flow, to look at the signalization of the area. It is rather contained to itself, but Brian can answer more.
Good evening, everyone. And I would also say that Mr. Tavani's here, who actually prepared the study on behalf of the development. So if we get into the weeds on any specific question that I can't answer, certainly we can defer to him. But the applicant did submit a traffic impact study associated with the proposed master plan, which incorporated the other developments that were anticipated in the area as well. So I think it's a, it's a best attempt at predicting traffic for such a long view. And we do think that the infrastructure with the improvements outlined can facilitate the expected traffic. Now, I would point out that there are some assumptions in the study that given the proximity and the mixed use, or the proximity of the proposed mixed uses to existing residential, et cetera, that there would be a fair percentage of people using transit, walking, biking, et cetera. So again, that's another variable that remains to be seen. The good part of your point about, incremental increases being portrayed as, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay, but at the end of the day, we've added a lot of traffic. The good part about the incremental increase is that we can track how well those variables are panning out with respect to, are we still getting the expected traffic impacts that we would with just conventional vehicular traffic associated with land uses. Pre-COVID, obviously there's still some unknowns as far as will remote work continue, even with all this office space. So would every day still be a peak day, for example, or is it just one day a week, 2 days a week? So I think, what I can say at this point is we've flushed out what we believe is a very reasonable look at the traffic, but it's something that, the developers agreement, the good aspect of it from our standpoint is that we will get to look at it in more detail on a building by building or phase by phase basis.
Okay. So Brian, as you know, I'm not a traffic engineer. I'm not going to try to go line by line, go into it at all. I trust you. I've worked with you. I have the utmost respect for you. I learned in statistics don't lie, statisticians do. It's all about the assumptions, right? Are those assumptions in there about transit, about, bike, are those reasonable assumptions in your mind based on what we know right now?
They're reasonable. So what we're looking at is about if we were to look purely at vehicular traffic, the expectation is that we'll be somewhere around 25 to 30% below that because of the proximity to transit and the residential, the walkability, so to speak, of the area. So, it's a matter of opinion. Some would see that as a little bit aggressive. For this area, it may be, we think it's reasonable given the types of land uses that we're talking about. But again, it's a little, it's a as you've talked about all night, it's a little bit of a crystal ball.
Okay.
But it's something that we need to keep, our eye on. Sure. And I would mention also that, PennDOT, as you know, is going to be heavily involved because Belmont, City Avenue, obviously are state roads. They're working on a plan for the intersection, which is also, and they're still working on their analysis of it, so we don't have any final results yet, but they are also taking into account the projected traffic from all of the potential developments surrounding that intersection.
Okay. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I don't get any more death stares from Commissioner Grimes. I am all set. I think I've asked the questions I needed to.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner McComb, please.
I'll be brief. I think we all appreciate this can be an enormously promising development, no doubt about it. I mean, I've seen this presentation, I've walked the site with all of you, it's great. The problem I have is we're all kind of hedging our bets. We're hedging against risk, and I certainly understand it. I know that Tishman has a huge commercial portfolio in New York that you have to manage, that nobody can predict what will take place over the next 20 years. I mean, nobody could predict COVID, nobody could predict a lot of things. I happen to agree that I think office space, suburban office space may be a sweet spot, and I think that's something you mentioned in a presentation with the Neighbor Club. I thought that was a good argument. The problem I'm having is, at the end of the day, some hypothetical Ward 9 resident says, Dave, you gave them a 20-year horizon, what did we get in exchange? And I'm having a hard time really putting my finger on what it is we get. We get, obviously we have the concept of a partnership, and that makes sense, but at the, I think I'm looking for something other than more resi, and I think the area can absorb more residential. I think that's, consistent with the zoning and the comprehensive plan, that I think we're looking for more than that. And so I'm a little concerned. You say, well, we could just jettison the whole thing and build multiple residential housing, but I think that the market doesn't justify the hotel and the office space, I'm not really sure it justifies building a whole bunch more apartments, because we're probably getting pretty close to the saturation point on that. We may not be there yet. So where do we go from here? I mean, we could sort of go round and round, but I appreciate President Sinai's comments in particular about sort of what it is we can hang our hat on that we're getting through the developers agreement. And the comment, well, maybe we just jettison it and go with 5 years. Maybe we do, but I don't want to have us blow up a very promising prospect. But I think you have to understand from our perspective, we need to get, what's the quid pro quo? What are we getting in exchange for giving the 20 years, which is really unusual. And yes, obviously it's a very unusual project, and I understand that, you know, these things take time and so forth, but I think we're looking for a little more comfort. A little more comfort that we're getting something in exchange. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bernheim.
Thank you very much. And so I'm going to do my very best not to, after I spill my coffee, not to be redundant. And I think we all get the concept of what you're trying to accomplish. And we've read a lot, and there was a group of us that have been working in connection with this developers agreement. Thank you, Gilman, for a period of time. And we are all wrestling with the same thing that's been articulated here in different fashions, is that where's the community benefit of doing something that's so unique, of doing this out, be it 30 years, 20 years, or whatever it is. It's something that we have not done and is not something that's commonly done in other municipalities as well. And while Commissioner McCone's worried about somebody asking him presently what's in it for us, I've mentioned this to President Sinai. I can envision some future board saying, what were they thinking, in doing this? And if indeed it is the concept that you have is that what you want to develop, and I have absolutely no reason whatsoever to question that, then maybe we do it at stages. And I accept the offer of our former colleague and my friend, Mr. Rosenzweig, and say, yeah, we'll accept your offer and we'll do this on a five-year increment. And you'll come forward and you'll say, this is what we can do now, this is what the market will permit. Because the information that we have here is a little bit inconsistent. When you talk about getting those A commercial buildings and wanting to have some of those type of tenants there, they're larger tenants. But yet the sweet spot, we're told, are spaces of 5,000 square feet and less, and that is 70% of what's currently occupying your buildings, which are 93% leased. Now, since I'm in the midst of negotiating my own lease in Center City, Philadelphia, and I've had to deal with a bunch of the commercial landlords there, I have a little bit of data that's what's going on. And the buildings all in town are, in fact, leased up when you look at the percentage of their leasing, but their occupancy rate of those people who are there, 50% is about the average of what's taking place. And the projections going forward is that may change, but not to a large degree. Read an article here, I'm not sure if it's a colleague of President Sinai's, but it came from Wharton, about stating that they envision you get 17% vacancy rate, and that's the current percentage, and that will increase, not decrease, within the short-term future. All of that being said is we can't predict what's going on any more than you can. Just in the period of time that we've been reviewing this, interest rates have gone up and down a graph that would look like the Swiss Alps. And if OPEC is really going to cut the oil production as they claim, you watch, those interest rates are going to go up, and you all know what that means to development and the difficulty. So why don't we deal with the market conditions as they're presented? You have this vision. We believe you wholeheartedly that that's what you want to do, but you can't commit to us any more than would be rightfully demanded upon you of what you're going to do now, any more than in 5 years, than what's really going to happen in the next 10. So why don't we deal with it on those 5-year chunks? You come back, hopefully you'll say, you know what, the market's changed, we're able to do our office space now, or maybe we're not. And this board, or whoever else is sitting up here in that period of time, will be able to make that evaluation. That may be the best way to go ahead and provide certainty as to what's going on, as opposed to what sounds like a great master plan, but something that you can't commit to, and I don't think that we can force you in some of the commitments that we would prefer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So before we continue, I'm looking at my colleagues that are participating online. If either of you have any questions or comments to make? I'm seeing none, okay. Didn't want you to think forget about you. Commissioner Zeloff, then.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. So if the goal we want is more commercial and more office space, how do we get there? This may be the way to do it. I mean, isn't that what's before us? So this is a vision, and it's in the form of a master plan. So it's about the future of a 65-acre commercial site. And so it's unique because of its size and location. So looking out 20 years for a large site, why wouldn't we want to do that? So if the plan is, if the goal is additional commercial office space, does this approach give us a better chance to get there? How do we get the next Amerisource Bergen? Is it amenities and getting them earlier? Is it creating an environment so that we're more competitive next time? Is this the roadmap for commercial and office development on City Avenue? It seems to me that it could be. And what we've been doing hasn't worked. So this may be the way to do it. Doesn't the developer need to be able to commit to a commercial tenant early with certainty? If it's a 2.5-year process before ground is broken, certainty that's in zoning and in rules that's needed for the long term to get to the goal. So what's there today is a sea of asphalt and some office buildings. And so creating density and walkability that I guess we all like, sounds like it, so will it actually happen? The trail connections, it sounds like a hotel could happen early, like in the first 8 years. If I understand it, the first 8 years are 174 units and a hotel or an office building, a hotel and commercial space, and a plaza, trails, and a park. So that sounds like a good outcome after 8 years. I don't know if we do nothing, if we don't have this, will that occur? So the only thing that is missing to me is it, and I can't see if it's incorporated here or not, and I bring this up regularly now on City Avenue developments, are there incentives? Is the developer committing to incentives to ensure retail and restaurant? Because we don't want empty space. And developers say they don't want empty space, but we have developments with empty space at grade. So we need to take steps to make sure that doesn't happen. But other than that, this plan makes sense to me. This approach to reaching the goal makes sense to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there other commissioners who wish to make any comments? Commissioner Kramer.
I think that, I don't think any of us aren't sold on the concept here. I think it's a wonderful concept. And I've seen 3 or 4 or 5 different presentations on this in different forums. I think that I like the idea of the developer agreement. I think that the 20 years is not unreasonable to get this done. But as everybody says, the devil's in the details. And maybe we don't have all the details in writing yet that we need to have to make the decision on it tonight. Maybe that we need to go back to the drawing board, and maybe we need to talk a little more and see some of the way in which the things that you will agree to are written, so that we can see how they look, what they look like in writing, because I know that there are a couple of major changes that you're willing to do. And maybe we can have some more talk about the issue that seems to be troubling many of my colleagues, which is, how do we make sure that we get what we all really want to have here? And so I would like to propose that we, if the preliminary plan has to be considered tonight, that we go ahead and consider it. And if it doesn't have to be considered tonight, that we table it for, say, a week or 2 weeks, to try to fine-tune some of these issues and maybe find some common ground on the areas where a number of my colleagues are still really troubled.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, Commissioner Kramer, I'm going to hold your suggestion in abeyance to make sure we get through other commissioner comments. So, thank you. Was there anything else?
No, that's it.
Any other? Yes.
Just very briefly, because I don't want to duplicate what anyone has said. I would almost word for word follow on what Commissioner Zeloff stated. And then following up, I think Commissioner Kramer really nails it on the head. I want this development. I like the development. I want the development in whole. And it seems like the developer's agreement might be the right way to go, but it seems to me from the discussion tonight, we just don't quite have the pieces together that we want. And it's not that we don't want the deal and we don't want the agreement and we don't want the development itself. We do. We want all of these things, but it just feels like we don't have it all pieced together yet. And so I would actually, again, wholeheartedly support everything Commissioner Zeloff said. And when I'll keep it in abeyance for now, but when the time is right, I think Commissioner Kramer, Gilda Kramer, that is spot on.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioner questions, comments? Okay, let me then let's say a few things that have been said, and I'm going to turn the focus now. As I said at the beginning, we have the developers agreement and we have the preliminary plan. So I'm going to turn the focus to the developers agreement for purposes of what I'm going to say now. We had been working with our solicitor and with Mr. Friscato and Mr. Rosenzweig on the language of the developers agreement. And there remain issues that I have with the legal language in that developers agreement, which I think what we've heard from other commissioners tonight is that there are open issues. And in particular, I heard two tentative agreements, modifications of the developers agreement when President Sinai was speaking. One was about doing building C1 with the R1A and R1B, and the other was Mr. Rosenzweig, when you said you were open to upgrading the transitional park if the office building isn't completed. So that's an example of language that we need to discuss some more. And I'm going to give you three others without, you're welcome to respond, you don't need to, because I think it's clear we need to work these things out. And if people will bear with me on the legal nitty-gritty, the developers agreement, amongst the issues that we've been discussing, the force majeure provision allows, amongst other things, a delay and an extension in the project's length for a force majeure, which includes governmental actions, particularly now because there was some flexibility, governmental actions that are not the town, that could be, for instance, if the EPA or the state environmental people have some issue, that could be a force majeure. I'm not asking for a debate. Under my interpretation of what the agreement says, that could extend the agreement or allow termination. Another thing, and I acknowledge there was some flexibility, the agreement allows the insurance requirements to be amended every 10 years under the most recent version. 10 years is a long time to lock in insurance requirements in our ever-changing world. I deal a lot with in this area, and because of security, insurance requirements a year ago are not what they were in many areas now. I think we need to have that discussion. And then probably the most important and the largest issue for me that we have to address, the agreement has had and still has a right of the developer to assign this project or pieces of this project. And when I say it's been amplified tonight, we've just spent 2 hours discussing how this partnership with Tishman Speyer, that is the basis of this conversation. Yet Tishman Speyer has the right to assign this project and relieve itself or pieces of this project tomorrow. If we sign this today, tomorrow. And we're now dealing without the township's right of consent, which we originally asked for. And so we could be dealing with totally different people a year from now than we're dealing with today, which isn't going to be a good thing, but it could be a bad thing for the township. So I raised the issue because I think that's something that we need to talk about, because if it's a partnership, we need to try and have a legal partnership and not one that changes characters. The characters is my wrong word. Changes people involved in charge of the project at various intervals. So you're welcome to react, but I'm saying more that I'm putting these issues out there for what I think is the logical next step that Commissioner Kramer suggested and Commissioner Whalen remarked on.
So, Commissioner Grimes, not intending to debate, but just intending to respond. We came in this evening believing that we had worked out the force majeure provision. We have agreed to strike subparagraph 7, which was the paragraph or the subparagraph of your concern, and we had addressed that with Solicitor High several days ago. And at least in our last conversation with Solicitor High, we believe that issue to be resolved. If you would like to take a look at subparagraph 7 that we have agreed to strike, and the parenthetical language we put in that was also at Solicitor High's request, I think that issue is resolved. The assignment, the insurance, is an issue that we addressed by making the relook at the insurance to be commensurate with commercial standards in the industry. I don't know what particular, we changed it to 10 years. It had been, there was no look previously. We changed it to 10 years because, we commit to leases and insurance requirements and projects all the time that are 10 years. If you want to look at that 10 years, we're happy to do it, but that 10 years was at least what we thought was a compromise. Last but not least, on the assignment, I think this is an important issue for me to just comment on, again, not debate, because this is bright line, okay? We cannot subdivide this property if you give us these approvals. Can't subdivide it. We cannot convey portions of it to third parties. So the notion of a partial assignment is one that is legally impossible. There are only 3 ways that we can involve another party. One is by way of a ground lease, in which case we're still involved, right? We're still the ground lease landlord, so we don't go away. We could do a joint venture, in which case we don't go away. Or the third possibility is we condominiumize it, which would mean that the entirety would become a land condominium. That's a very complicated process, particularly in a site where pieces have to fit together, and one building has improvements and underground structures that relate to another building, right? And amenities and all sorts of other things. Theoretically, we could condominiumize it. But in that instance, there is still a master developer and a master association. So in none of those instances can we just simply assign to a third party a portion of this. And I'm happy to have further discussion on that, but I think that that is not a legal possibility. And then with respect to the notion of what I'll call a wholesale assignment, could Tishman sell the entirety of the property, including the 1 million square feet of existing office? And the answer is yes, that could happen. And under no circumstances, on any day, would there be an agreement to have the township be able to consent to who Tishman would freely convey the entirety of the property to, except to say this. It's not going to be Joe Smith, and it's not going to be, there are only a few players in the national market who would have the wherewithal to come up with the roughly $250 million to $300 million that it would take to buy that site. And in which case you would be dealing with a Tishman-like entity, if not Tishman itself. And no corporate entity, has forever life. Tishman Speyer happens to be run by Jerry Speyer, but, who, by the way, is part of the Tishman family, meaning Speyer married a Tishman. So it is actually, Tishman Speyer is different names of a collective family. But, one could never predict what could happen, may he live and be well, to Jerry Speyer or anything else. So the one thing that cannot be a part of a negotiation is any restraint in the ability of Tishman to fully convey their rights and ownership. And you should also know they're equity partners in this deal, so that Tishman is not 100% of the equity. There are equity investors, and those equity investors have not been the same over the entire period of time. So that has changed. It has been seamless and unknowing to anybody, but they're not the same equity investors. But in terms of any worry that there be a sub-piece and somehow some piece of this is going to be developed by some other party and there's not accountability to the master developer, a term I'm using broadly, that can't happen in this case. So happy to discuss that more later. And again, not meaning to debate, just meaning to respond.
Thank you. So I am going to stick with the rule that I have suggested to other commissioners, and as much as I'd like to not comment at this time, but say that, but move on with the conversation. We have heard the suggestion that we move to table the developers agreement. I would move that we do table it for 2 weeks until the meeting of, have a special board building and planning meeting on October 18th.
It would actually be October 19th.
Oh, is it the 19th? 6, 12, it would be you're right, I'm sorry, I can't, sorry about that. The motion would be to, I'm sorry, did you have a comment about the motion?
Just a request. The request would be that you table it all. You table the preliminary plan and the developers agreement and bring it together in whenever you say.
Okay, so
Can we look at the township secretary to make sure she's...
So we'll have to just discuss the timing because we have a presentation that night and a large bunch of firemen coming in.
So would you prefer that we not set a specific date tonight as part of our motion?
Why don't we do that?
Mr. Grimes, how about next week?
Figure it out.
Well, I don't know that that's going to be enough time to, that's 6 days from now.
It's actually one day because it would have to be advertised tomorrow.
Right, if we did a special board meeting. There's already a B&P meeting next week,
Yes.
but,
It'd be hard to get the packet out.
yeah, let's
Right.
table it and
If I may, we've
figure out.
had so many discussions about this, and there have been a number of iterations, and I know that President Sinai circulated to everybody here the history of what the subcommittee has done on this, that if we're going to advance or move forward or address any of these issues, it's probably going to be in one more meeting, and that we can do that promptly and get this on the 19th, and we'll sort of know where we're headed with this. So, I mean, we've all spent a lot of time on this. I believe we all understand the issues. And unless somebody's going to nod their head no, I think we can do it.
No, that's fine. So my motion, I will change my motion to that we table this. I'm sorry.
It's a question, and whether, if you're going to table it all now, I understand, but do you want to ask any questions about the plan now, just so we get those out on the table? So that
Well, I'll tell you what I was going to do if the answer is, I think it was your co-counsel's suggestion, we table the entire thing, so that's what we would do, which would end the conversation if the board approves it. Although, what I was going to do, which doesn't directly answer your question, is there may be members of the public who came here to make public comments, so I was going to suggest if I could just finish my thought, if we do pass the motion, I was still going to ask President Sinai if we could elicit public comment if anyone is here, because I would hate for someone to have sat here and not had an opportunity. So.
And also just in response to the question there, I mean, like, certainly I have some comments on the plan that
Would you like to make them tonight?
Well, it might be more efficient just to get them out there so everyone's heard it and we have like one.
So we can have the motion to table both, but we'll still take comments from commissioners.
That's why I was asking.
If that works, okay? Yeah, that's right. So.
Well, why don't you just procedurally do the comments, then table it?
Yes,
Just-
much better.
Right. Okay.
Much better.
Well, because we have the developers agreement on the table.
Well, I understand. So.
Or, you know what, it's fine.
Go ahead.
We haven't,
Do it.
no one's made a motion on the developers agreement yet, so we're okay. Okay, so I'm going to withdraw the motion temporarily, thank you. And let me do two things. If any commissioners have comments about the preliminary plan, I would ask that you don't duplicate things that you've already said, but you're certainly welcome now to make those comments. And then we will move to public comment at that time. Go ahead, President Sinai.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Grimes. And I will keep this as brief as I can. It's just simply we have a number of conditions that I think at least some of us have observed that the ratio of shall considers and shall explorers is probably higher than we usually see at this point, and so I understand that so I guess I have a few of these. I was especially curious about whether they were things that there was a particular reason why we couldn't make them shalls, right? And I'll circulate this language to you so like you guys have it since we're gonna have a couple weeks. One is condition 5. And some of that was discussed, right, which is, the relocating the hotel and building R1C and, whether we can get rid of the parking garage. And I think the presentation said, we were thinking about some of those things. And then the relocating the Ring Road and Office North building driveway so it no longer bisects the Village Square. Now, during the presentation, I believe you said that you had found a way to have it not cut it in half.
Correct.
I see a nod over there. So that condition is either, like the second half of it is either moot or, we can get rid of the shall consider and explore, just like say, we shall revise the plan and we'll go with the one where the street doesn't get in the way of that potential amenity space. I think that would make sense to do. And I have some language here, I'll just give you a copy. Condition 13, is something that I raised in tentative sketch, and I thought we had dealt with, and pretty much every building in this development, if I understand it, is built on top of structured parking, right? Yes. And the concern was, from a street level, you have ground floor retail, and then above you have some layers of structured parking. Sometimes as much as I don't remember, like 8 stories. I don't remember what the maximum is, and then buildings on top of that. And, the vision that when I pictured it in my head back in tentative sketch was, we'll all be walking around where it's like the suburban square, like parking lot where, they've got some retail on the ground floor, but it's like clearly retail on the ground floor of a parking garage. And if the whole idea is to make a high caliber office environment, taking the Amerisource Bergen building, which is also on top of a parking garage, and plunking it here is really not the vision that I had in mind. I thought that you guys didn't have in mind. And so my comment back then was, well, it should be, the parking should be disguised to the point that it's really very complementary to the streetscape. And the way it showed up here is that we're going to like wrap it in like, some fabric kind of thing. And that didn't compute. And so I have a suggestion that we my preference would be to change condition 13. So, the structured parking, the applicant shall eliminate exposed or unwrap upper story structured parking visible on the building exterior from the public way. If upper story structured parking is visible on a secondary facade not visible from the public way, the applicant shall utilize architectural treatments such as green walls to reduce visibility, and the architectural treatment shall enhance the public view and/or pedestrian environment. And so we have a couple weeks for you to consider that and come back and, we can modify it. But certainly from my perspective, I think it's important that the conditions be consistent with the vision that we espoused. And I worry about having a whole bunch of buildings where people feel like they're walking around parking garages with buildings perched on top of them. So condition 14 is a applicant shall explore design elements in the architecture of the Belmont Avenue facing the building facade that complement the adjacent residential neighborhood. And again, I wasn't sure why this wasn't just something that you would do the architecture so it complements the adjacent residential buildings. Again, you'll have the opportunity to consider that. Condition 18 got addressed. That is the relocating some of the public gathering spaces to move them to more useful locations from a planning perspective, and enhancing the greening to shield the roundabout. Should that materialize? Again, hopefully that is something that you're just willing to commit to do as opposed to exploring. Condition 20 is again a relocation of a public gathering space to a more productive location, and I think again that was something that got discussed in the presentation, and something that you guys had considered, and hopefully can just do it. And then condition 21, sorry, that's the one I mentioned already. That's the greening. Okay, so those were the main conditions. There are other shall explores, and I guess my question was the things about reconfiguring the site plan to provide a better pedestrian experience. This might be a question for staff. The reconfiguring Office North 2 and R2C to locate the tower further from neighboring development, investigating the possibility of joining two or more of the buildings to the towers would obscure the structured parking, and moving the parking areas located away from pedestrian areas to the greatest extent possible, which is 8 through 11.
Those were planning commission.
Those are planning commission, yeah, exactly. They're underlined as insertions. And I was just wondering, where you guys are on that, in terms of maybe you disagree, which is why there shall considers. Maybe you haven't had time to fully consider them. Maybe I'm trying to limit my questions to ones that are appropriate at this stage, but those seem appropriate at this stage.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to address those unless you want staff to do it. But just working backwards, reconfiguring the site plan to ensure parking areas are located away from pedestrian areas. There's only one legacy parking lot on the one surface lot on the property, and that would be behind one Bala. So there aren't any other surface parking lots. So I don't think that there's anything we need to address there because there is no surface parking. Number 10, joining two or more buildings that the towers share. We would need variance relief to do that under the code. It's an impossibility. So we can't do that. Reconfiguring Office North 2 and R2C to locate the tower further from neighboring developments. We did take a look at that, and there's no meaningful, because of the setbacks for building to building under the code, there's no meaningful change there to relocate the buildings. We can move one building, I think, a foot south, and the other one maybe 30 feet. So there's no meaningful change for that one. And investigating the site plan for a more meaningful pedestrian experience. I mean, you saw what Yaki presented. I don't think you can do better than he did.
Yeah, I think my only response, and again, we have a couple of weeks to think about that, is that if some of these things can be contracted in the developer's agreement to make a more attractive plan, because we could just say, okay, well, we will. You can put the buildings closer together, right? Then by all means, let us know. And then the last question is about condition 16, which is providing additional streetscape space adjacent to commercial uses to accommodate streetscape amenities such as planted areas and outdoor dining. It says shall explore potentially providing, so we'll at least delete the potentially. And again, this seems like a no-brainer unless it's already in the design and you guys don't agree with it.
And I think that a lot of these shallow explorers, Commissioner Sinai, President Sinai, are the result that we're coming back again. So these, as we would.
So that will be when we do the
as we
next.
would bring those plans
the
forward,
next-
we're going to sit down with
that's
staff
fine.
and try and work through all
Yeah.
of those shallow explorers. They're just place savers, so they inform the design coming forward.
Yeah, that's fine. Things that come in the next round, I don't feel the need to deal with right now. Okay.
All things, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner
Anyone
Grimes.
else? Commissioner Kramer?
Well, I have one minor comment, which is in condition number 40. I don't think that the plan should be submitted to the Environmental Advisory Council. I think it should be submitted to the township, and the board can refer it to the, from a procedural standpoint, the board would automatically refer it. And I just think that sending it just to the Environmental Advisory Council will bypass our sustainability manager. And our sustainability manager should be involved in the evaluation. So I think it should be just, if she'll submit the plan to the township. And I don't know what staff has to say about that, but that would be my suggestion on making that change to it.
All right, thank you.
I think at this stage, that's how they would come. So if we had these amended plans as they came forward, we would fully expect to be forwarding these off to the Environmental Advisory Council. Are you, and I was having a little bit of trouble hearing you, are you suggesting that the entire plan now be forwarded to the Environmental?
No, I'm suggesting that paragraph 40 be changed so that the applicant shall submit the plan to the township for the evaluation of the environmental impacts. And then we can refer it to the Environmental Advisory Council.
That's certainly your prerogative.
That I think is the appropriate way that it should be
That's the appropriate
handled.
way to write that. We would agree.
And if I may, I would assume the applicant would have no objection to that change. So it's one less thing to talk about. Okay. Anything else, Commissioner Kramer?
I think on the sustainability issue, I would like to know your position about whether you're going to try to build these buildings, the new buildings, to be net zero buildings, because that's really our long-term goal, that everything be electric and everything be net zero in the township. And I just wanted to know if that's your expectation and if you're willing to commit to doing anything like that.
I think that, again, this is one of those instances where none of these buildings have been designed. And so as we bring the plans forward, this is, again, another placeholder, another discussion we have with staff to try and implement what's in the condition at the time the building comes forward. It's not, you're going to get another bite of the apple, another review. And so that's why a lot of these shall explorers shall take a look at.
Does that mean you want to do that or you don't want to do it? Not trying to be blunt.
No, I mean,
is that your plan?
It depends on the building, I guess is an answer. And again, we've committed to having the discussions with staff in the township as each building is brought forward.
I would like to see a little firmer commitment on that, if at all possible, because if you look at what our goals are and what some of the goals on a national level are, we really have to do this completely with all new buildings here in the township. And I would like you to give some more thought to how much you can commit to on that.
Okay. Other Commissioner Zeloff.
Thank you, Commissioner Grimes. It is not the goal of this township that all buildings be only electric. That is the goal of some. It has never been established that it is a goal of this township. It may become that one day, but natural gas is certainly a viable source of energy. There is conditions of approval in recent land development that says developer shall consider. There's never been anything beyond that, and I would not support a condition that goes beyond shall consider. I frankly don't support the condition shall consider, but it has no meaning. So it's easy to leave. But to say that it is the goal of the township is not an accurate statement. So
I think
I have the floor. It is not an accurate statement. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. Other commissioners? Are commissioners online? No, nothing. Okay, so I'll close that portion, and now we will, thank you, we're finished with that portion. Now we'll take, if there's any public comment, we'll take the public comment now. And just to remind those doing public comment, we don't have strict time frames. We generally ask you to keep your comments about 3 minutes or so.
Good evening. I think I can do that. My name is David Mackey. The first thing I should tell you is I'm not a resident of Lower Merion Township. I'm an interested third party. The second thing I should tell you is I've known Janet Giuliani for 30 years professionally. And I can tell you that in my 40 years of professional real estate development and advisory type work, I have never, very few times have I ever seen anyone professional, more professional with higher standards of integrity than Janet and Tishman Speyer Properties, who I also dealt with 35 years ago in Boca Raton, Florida. I've been in the commercial office environment for 35, 40 years, not in Bala, but in, let's say, the suburban areas with other major developers like Liberty and Brandywine over the years, and Jackson Cross as an advisory role to corporate users. And Janet didn't ask me to be here tonight. I came here because I was aware of it. I was following it. It's a dynamic, exciting project. But Tishman Speyer and Janet, who's their professional representative, needs a roadmap and cannot induce or entice or secure Amerisource Bergen or anybody else moving out of the city without a plan and a roadmap that has some flexibility and guidelines. One of the gentlemen who spoke earlier said, you know, in so many words, you've been seeking or bargaining for work, live, play, and you haven't gotten it. Well, just recently, One Belmont, which is across the street and has a big office building, just was approved for, I believe, 2 new residential buildings on that site with retail, with perhaps, I don't know, a fitness center. So there is a work, live, and play environment across the street. And I don't know the Federated site so well, but I know that they were recently or last year approved for 3 different blocking phases where Saks? Lord and Taylor, sorry. Where that will be soon demolished. And so to say that you don't have live, work, and play there, people are already living there in the new apartment building behind the shopping center. The shopping center is going to be redeveloped. More apartments will be built, perhaps office, I'm not sure of the approval. But there's another live, work, and play environment right in the neighborhood. Now, corporate users like an Amerisource Bergen or whoever might move from the city, they don't want to have apartments across the street, crossing Belmont Avenue. They want to see a captive environment that's protected and well-designed and well-executed. But to say that office users are going to come there without residential on the site, I mean, the residential has to come first to induce office. I'm not saying it's never been done otherwise, but it certainly makes it more attractive. And you talk about having, well, let's have restaurants and retail. Well, they're not going to come either if there's no residents. You need the residents to get the retail and the restaurants on site so you can get the next Amerisource Bergen or anybody else who comes along and wants to consider Bala. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, and I apologize for being the one between you and your bedrooms, so I apologize from the get-go. But good evening. My name is Brian Finstermaker, and I am the president and CEO of City Avenue Special Services District. I'm also a Lower Merion resident and was a member of the Comprehensive Plan Committee back in 2016. I started my position with the City Ave District in January, so it put me there about 10 months, and have been in meetings with you all over the past, learning a little bit about the projects. I want to give you a little bit of background for myself. For those commissioners that I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet, I look forward to doing so in the near future and set some time up so we can talk and learn a little bit more about the district and what we have plans. I'll go over a little bit of those here as we get through this. City Ave District is a municipal authority that serves Lower Merion Township and in Philadelphia. Through tax assessments, ratepayers in the district contribute to additional services such as capital improvements, marketing, events, and safety through our CSRs and bike patrol. Tishman Spire is one of our largest contributors to the district. I would note that most of our most important role within the district is that in serving as convener between the township, Philadelphia, and other organizations to maintain and improve the district. Just as background, I was recruited by City Avenue District from the enterprise from the East Passyunk Avenue in South Philadelphia. My role as executive director included property acquisition, rehabilitation, tenanting mixed-use commercial buildings, and developing and maintaining public spaces such as a singing fountain. East Passyunk Avenue didn't happen overnight, and it does take time to build momentum for an organization, and it's an organization to maintain it. City Avenue District is starting to build that momentum, and I'm excited to be working with so many engaged partners and take it to the next level like Tishman. I just returned from the International Downtown Association conference, where I shared and gathered ideas with over 1,000 of my peers. The work of business improvement districts do is what gives neighborhoods a true sense of place. A sense of place doesn't happen in a car on I-76, but it happens through interactions in public spaces, restaurants, and on the Kenwood Trail. It is my experience that interacting in those spaces makes a community. And yes, COVID has impacted the trajectory and recovery of our communities, specifically our commercial districts, but I remain confident in the City Avenue District and its future. That future lies with the project before you this evening. City Avenue District is in support of Tishman's preliminary plan. It's an important project that continues the evolution of the district, and it's fortunate to have great developers like Tishman with a good track record. They understand the commercial and retail landscape. City Avenue District is confident that Tishman will deliver its phased development plan that supports the township and the community. The district is an economic catalyst for the township, and I had this conversation on a soccer field today on asking how we maintain our tax base in the city, and I'm happy to be able to explain that the City Avenue District is one of the leaders there. This is a flagship development, and through its economic direct impact, the multiplier effect of this project associated with commercial retail will go directly to the township taxes, real estate, schools, sewer, business privilege. There will be employment opportunities and amenities for residents. The district looks forward to working with them as this project comes to fruition. Like Tishman and Keystone and Federal and St. Joe's, among others, the district is partnering with Lower Merion Township, the City of Philadelphia, and neighborhood residents on some important initiatives that bring these development projects to create a true sense of place. I'm going to go over those real briefly with you so I can get you all out of here and home. The first is we're undertaking a strategic planning initiative with our board. Through a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that impact our mission, stakeholders are being interviewed through this process, and Lower Merion staff and commissioners have been done so. The resulting plan will guide our organization through the next 5 years. Secondly, City Avenue District is evaluating firms to provide a retail and merchandising plan and implementation strategy playbook. The selected firm will undertake quantitative analysis, which will include stakeholder interviews to provide insight into commercial and retail landscape. I know that we've talked a little bit here about the failed landscape of the commercial district itself. I still think it's early in that stage, especially with what we've gone through in the past, and I think this is actually a prime opportunity for us, given that we couldn't hire enough employees anyway if we did have these active spaces. So timing is actually playing into our hand. This plan will deliver information that can be used to address current and future tenanting decisions. It will help the district attract new businesses and allow landlords to be optimistic and opportunity to look at opportunities that they might not have considered in their spaces. We've had some of those issues on Bala Ave that has been in front of you as well. It will allow the district to create educational material to promote the area's advantages. The district looks forward to sharing the results of these plans with staff and the commissioners upon its completion. We're happy to come through and do a presentation for you in that regard. And finally, the district will release a request for proposal this fall on a commercial corridor enhancement plan. Thanks to Senator Hughes, Representative Cephas, and Commissioner McComb. The plan will evaluate the avenue, Bala Avenue, and joining commercial nodes of improvement and beautification. The goal is to make a unified district. This plan will enhance the opportunities regarding landscape, lighting, signage, and fixtures. A steering committee will be brought together to assist with this process and plan. The City Avenue District couldn't do the work it does without the experienced partners like Tishman, Keystone, Federal, and St. Joe's, among others. So I thank you for your time and look forward to working with you, and happy to answer any questions about our initiatives and the plans before you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other public comment?
We do have one online, Bob Handler.
Okay, Mr. Handler, you're on.
Hi, I'm a Sutton Terrace resident. I live on the 4th floor overlooking the 13 Bala property. At the current time in the summer, all we see are trees out our windows. It's great. In the winter, we will see one Bala Plaza all winter long, and we appreciate how it looks. I'm also a young 70 at the moment, but my impression is that much of the amenities on the inner part of the property will probably be beyond my lifetime. And I appreciate the attention to the periphery of the property that will be allowing us as community members to have enhancement to our walkability and our enjoyment. And it seems to me that this plan with the transitional park, if you look, I'll use that expression, is great. That would be very accessible to me. I have a question, I guess, for the landscape architect, which is, it seems to me that all of the Bala Park major development really is closed off by all of the buildings. And by my look at it, the only way that it's even visible is in the southeast corner where that entrance is. That's the only place that anybody will see that from the outside. I don't know if that's correct or not, but I just wonder how that allows people to have a sense of what is really in the middle of the property. And then maybe for Chris and Jillian, can you guys tell me how the acreage, how the size of the Bala Park 234 compares with other parks in the township? I can't get a feel for how big that area really is. And overall, I definitely think this is a great plan with some concerns about many things, but overall, I'm approving of it, even though I'm going to watch this as I age in place.
Thank you very much. Let me just see if there's any other, is there any other public comment?
There is no other public.
I'm sorry, none other?
No.
Okay, fine. So I'll close public comment. Did anyone want to respond to, at this point, to public comment?
Wanted to respond and thank Mr. Handler for his comments and let him know that we'll reach out with some comparison numbers for park sizes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? So we now have a motion we have to put on the table to, the motion will be to table consideration of the developers agreement and the preliminary plan until a special building and planning committee meeting on October 19th of this year. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner McComb. I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much, and that concludes the business of building and planning.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes. And with that, that concludes the business of the Board of Commissioners for this evening.